and with plans to scale up to 500 megawatts. One of the biggest barriers to success in the AI age is the immense amount of energy the technology uses. The Energy Secretary and I are convening and co-chairing a new AI Energy Council to provide expert insight into how to meet this demand, including opportunities to accelerate investment in innovative solutions such as small modular reactors. Infrastructure alone, though, is not enough. To deliver security, prosperity and opportunity for every citizen into the long term, we must be makers of this technology and not just takers. Britain needs our own national champions, our own Googles and Microsofts. We are launching a new dedicated team with the mandate to strengthen our sovereign AI capacities by supporting high-potential frontier AI companies in the UK. This team will work across and beyond government, partnering with the fast-growing firms to ensure that they can access the compute capacity, the data, the global talent they need to succeed in Britain. We have already seen how a small number of companies at the frontier of AI are set to wield outsized global influence. We have a narrow window of opportunity to secure a stake in the future of AI. By acting now, we can secure a better future for the British people in the decades to come. But this is just the start. We will safely unlock the value of public sector data assets to support secure, responsible, and ethical AI innovation. We will overhaul the skills system to safeguard our status as a top destination for global talent, with a workforce that is ready for the AI age. And we will use a scan, pilot, and scale approach to quickly identify and trial ways of using AI to transform our economy and improve our public services. The stakes just couldn't be higher. This is a top priority for the Prime Minister and across government. We will harness the power of AI to fulfil our promise to the British people of better jobs, better public services, and better lives. We've attracted more than £25 billion worth of investment into AI since we took office. This week alone, global giants have committed a further £14 billion worth of investment. Phase 2 of the spending review will see every department using technology to drive forward our national missions to deliver better value for taxpayers. AI will also be fundamental to the industrial strategy to attract investment, to grow the economy, and create high-quality, well-paid jobs right across the country. Madam Deputy Speaker, the AI revolution is now. This government is determined to fully harness this opportunity for the British businesses and working people right across the United Kingdom. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State Alan Mack.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement. And let me begin by thanking Matt Clifford for his work. Having known Matt for many years, I'm grateful for his long-standing contribution to the tech sector, including the last Conservative government. And Madam Deputy Speaker, it was that last Conservative government which identified the opportunities of AI early, and we acted decisively. We kept Britain out of the EU's anti-growth regulatory regime, enabling our tech sector to flourish. In contrast, the Secretary of State is on record praising the EU's approach to AI, which even President Macron rejected. So, can the Secretary of State rule out regulatory alignment with the EU on AI issues? We also launched, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Incubator for AI, which led groundbreaking work to improve productivity, as well as the gov.uk chatbot. Both were led by my honourable friend, the member for Brentwood and Ongar. And can the Secretary of State guarantee the future of both projects under this government? Madam Deputy Speaker, we also provided £500 million for AI compute because our AI sector requires cutting-edge computing power as well as more energy to power data centres. Labour's energy policy is taking our country to the brink of blackouts. So instead of just launching another quango today, the AI Energy Council, can he assure the House that the AI sector will have reliable access to all the energy it needs? Madam Deputy Speaker, it was a Conservative government that organised the world's first AI Safety Summit and delivered the world's third largest AI market, fostering an environment in which Sir Demis Hassabis won the Nobel Prize last year. Even the Prime Minister admitted today that when it comes to AI, Britain starts from a position of strength. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, the bad news is Labour are already squandering the world-leading AI position we built up for Britain. Last July, one of Labour's first actions on entering government was cutting £1.3 billion of funding for Britain's first exascale supercomputer and the AI research resource, both of which Matt Clifford says deserve support in his report. So why didn't the Secretary of State stand up to the Chancellor when she cut his funding last July? Madam Deputy Speaker, anyone reading the plan will also see it's been fully drenched in Labour gobbledygook, peppered with references to missions, mission delivery boards, clusters, sector champions, and even local trusted intermediaries. Their plan confirms what everyone suspected all along. Labour prefers technocratic jargon to the actual tech sector. Madam Deputy Speaker, this plan was ready last September and due to be published last November. So why has Labour delayed publication again and again and finally chosen a day when they needed to divert attention away from the beleaguered Chancellor? Madam Deputy Speaker, what's not in their plan is even more telling than what's in it. Firstly, there's nothing that corrects the huge damage Labour has already inflicted on the AI sector through the Chancellor's National Insurance Jobs Tax, which punishes every tech worker by £900 per person per year. So will the Secretary of State apologise today for making our tech workers take a wage cut and reducing their living standards? Labour's response is also full of aspirational dates for targets to be met, but there are no specific plans setting out how they will achieve these targets or how they will pay for them. So much for the Chancellor's iron grip on the public finances. So given there is no new funding, will the Secretary of State give the House a precise date for publishing his spending plans and confirm what funding will be cut from existing projects to pay for this plan's 50 new commitments? And Madam Deputy Speaker, why has the government created 2 more AI quangos today? The Prime Minister has announced or created a quango almost every week since coming to office. Today it's clearly the tech sector's turn. So can the Secretary of State reassure the House and the country that his 2 new AI quangos won't just tie up our tech sector in more red tape? Madam Deputy Speaker, last week the Chancellor fled the country, and as she headed east, our economy went south. Labour promised growth, but they delivered failure. They published an underwhelming plan 3 months late. They punished our tech workers with national insurance jobs tax. They've saddled our tech sector with red tape and more quangos and aligned themselves with the EU when everybody else is saying no. Labour's delayed AI plan is analogue government in the digital age. Slow, uninspiring and not good enough for Britain. Our country deserves the best, but Labour have let Britain down again.
Secretary of State.
I'm kind of grateful for the honourable member's comments, but also I feel a little bit sorry for him because he praises Matt Clifford and his independent report because he is an astonishing person, and we should all as a House pay credit to somebody who has been so successful in the tech sector, out there in the real economy, and he gives up so much time for public service. I'm grateful for him. But he then goes on to talk about his report as if it's Labour's report, full of gobbledygook. It wasn't Labour's report. It was Matt Clifford's report. If he respected him, he wouldn't be attacking the very same report that he authored. I didn't author it. I've just looked at the recommendation, seen the logic in it, and seen the scale of the ambition that is contained within it, and said, yes. Yes, we share that sense of ambition, and we will deliver it too. And if he cared so much about compute, if he cared so much about the exascale computer, then his government, when he was in government, would have done something fundamental to delivering it. They would have allocated the money. Pretty basic stuff. If you're standing up in public and saying that we will deliver something, is actually to allocate the resources in order to deliver it. That project never existed because the money never existed. It was a fraud committed on the scientific community of our country, smoke and mirrors from the outset, and all I did was be honest with the public about the scale of the deceit that was inflicted on them. I corrected a wrong from the previous administration. And now today, we have a plan that the task that was set for Matt Clifford wasn't to look at what government, particularly the previous government, was capable of, and then to try and design a programme that was limited by the scale of their chaotic abilities. I asked Matt Clifford, and the Prime Minister asked Matt Clifford, to look at the potential of our country if we get everything right. when it comes to the digital infrastructure and opportunities of the future. And that is what his plan has done. And there are things that this government needs to do differently in order to realise the potential that is out there in our country. And that is what we have set about today by accepting all 50 recommendations. Madam Deputy Speaker, when they were in office, they did down our country. And now, in opposition, they do nothing but talk it down. And that is a shame.
Yeah. Select Committee Chair Chianmura.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I welcome the government's embracing AI and the Secretary of State's leadership in accepting every single one of Matt Clifford's recommendations. I hope he will be as receptive in accepting the recommendations of my committee. But does he agree with me that those who say that this plan is irrelevant to the challenges of economic growth and public sector financing that we face right now fundamentally misunderstand the nature of the opportunities that AI represents? Its presence everywhere in our lives already, the frenetic pace of its implementation and its ability to drive growth. And most importantly, they misunderstand the nature of business confidence. Having a government that understands how to drive these opportunities into every home, business and public sector service in the land is a reason for business confidence.
Secretary of State.
I'm extremely grateful for her comments and the service of her and her committee. It was a privilege to go before her committee so soon into its formation, and I look forward to engaging into the future. She is completely right. We hear a lot about business confidence and the words that come out of certain aspects of the business community, but today they have voted with their investment. We have announced an additional £14 billion, the creation of up to 13,000 jobs as a result of the investment today. That is business showing confidence in this government. And of course, many of the schemes announced today, the policies, will deliver into the short, the medium and into the long term. But that investment, coupled with our Regulatory Innovation Office, coupled with our planning reforms, will mean that shovels go into the ground quickly, and the jobs and the wealth that will be created by it will start paying dividends very soon.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Victoria Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of the statement. We are all too aware of the economic malaise inherited from the previous Conservative government. Innovation in technology can help reverse years of decline, and the UK must be a world leader in quality innovation, from helping to save lives to boosting our economy. Good tech is good for business. That's why safety and AI innovation must go hand in hand. We must build trust and bring people along, not risk breeding suspicion or fear. As the Ada Lovelace Institute said this morning, there will be no bigger roadblock to AI's transformative potential than a failure in public confidence. The National Data Library would represent a major shift in public sector data handling. So how will the government ensure the necessary safeguards are in place? How will they ensure the public maintain confidence? While the focus on AI training is welcome, we must go beyond high-level skills. Not only are tech companies themselves calling out for technical skills, but AI is here now, shaping workplaces, services and lives. What is being done to ensure all sectors of society can access lifelong learning and training? Where is the strategy to address digital exclusion so no one is left behind? Furthermore, the text and data mining regime is a concern. Creatives will be dismayed by the government's acceptance of an opt-out system, and I would urge the government to reassess. The Prime Minister says our AI safety infrastructure is world-leading, but companies are calling for better funding access with better support from the British Business Bank, simpler ways of working with international talent, and indeed that better infrastructure from labs to internet access. How will you choose where those AI growth zones will be and ensure the benefits are shared across the UK? How will you ensure that small, innovative startups are not left behind? Finally, innovation must go hand in hand with safety and trust, with the right guardrails in place to promote safety by design. Only by doing so can we lead in quality innovation and ensure the benefits are felt across the UK.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for her constructive comments. She mentions trust. Trust is incredibly important in this whole agenda. We've seen too many times in the past where a fearful public failed to fully grasp the potential for innovation that comes out of the scientific community of the country. And we're not going to make that mistake. We understand from the outset that in order to take the public with us on this, we must inspire confidence. We must have safety assured from the outset. And that is a commitment that I make today. Because if people aren't safe, they aren't protected, and they don't feel safe, then they aren't going to confidently explore all the potential that AI and the digital world presents to them, their families, their communities, their businesses, and us as a country. And we must ensure that they do so. On intellectual property, there is a consultation that's underway right now, and the Honourable Lady, along with the rest of the public and all the interested parties, are very welcome to take part. Indeed, I implore that they do so. On growth zones present the most remarkable opportunity for parts of our country, and we want to make sure that not just every part of the country benefits from it, but those parts of the country who have experienced deindustrialisation in the past, who have suffered at the hands of the Conservative government over 14 years of stagnation, chaos, and poor strategic planning when it comes to our economy, that they benefit the most. In the coming weeks, we will announce the process by which we'll be selecting the future AI growth zones. I implore areas, regions, parts of our country who are interested in this to start looking at the direction of travel from this government, to see whether they can play a part in it, and whether they can get involved and start delivering AI growth zones in their area, because there are parts of this country that will really benefit, and we want to make sure that we have a really eager set of local authorities and areas to take advantage of it.
Dr. Alison Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Cities like Stoke-on-Trent, left behind by the previous Conservative government, could significantly benefit from targeted AI investment. AI growth zones are one such opportunity, and we have a great site in Stoke-on-Trent and energy innovations. Can the Secretary of State outline plans for using AI to drive investment to the createch hub that is Stoke-on-Trent?
Secretary of State.
The people of Stoke-on-Trent are extremely lucky to have such a strong advocate, not just for the infrastructure of the future, but for the skills and the talent that exists right across Stoke-on-Trent. I can assure her that we are eagerly awaiting any interest that Stoke-on-Trent shows in the growth zone area, but also in all the other announcements that came out of the plan today. We are not going to do to communities. We are going to partner with communities, with areas, and with the nations of the United Kingdom to make sure that everyone benefits, and are those who are hungry to embrace this agenda will have an active partner in my department and this.
Dame Caroline Dinage.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The action plan calls for an AI sector champion in the creative industries, but it feels to me that what the government really needs is a creative industries champion, because the government's copyright and AI consultation, which is so crucial for the creative industries, doesn't close until the 25th of February. And one of the options on the table includes maintaining our current gold standard copyright regime. So why is it that it seems the government have already made their mind up on that consultation, because this plan heralds the reform of UK text and data mining regime to be at least as competitive as the EU's. This plan makes a nonsense of that consultation, doesn't it?
Secretary of State.
The Honourable Lady, unfortunately, doesn't understand the idea of a consultation. We are open-minded, and she says, and we are listening eagerly to the sector. But what I won't do, Madam Deputy Speaker, is be forced to make a choice. We have the second largest creative industries market in the world. We have the third largest AI market in the world. This is a gift for a country like ours. Two great sectors that are rooted in the future of where global economic prosperity lies. And she and that party want us to make a choice between one or the other, and we will not make that choice. She calls for a government champion for the creative arts. We have one. It is the Minister for Creative Arts, and he sits alongside me, and I'm very grateful to do so.
John Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Small businesses and startups are vital to the local economy in High Peak and across the UK. Can the Secretary of State set out how his AI action plan will support those small businesses to seize the opportunities of AI going forward and deliver the growth that we desperately need across the country?
Yeah. Secretary of State.
Yeah, I'm grateful, and the people of and businesses of High Peak have a great champion in him, and in so doing, they will be able to reap the rewards, because one of the key things is we need all parts of the economy to fully embrace digital technology in the digital future, and to do so with confidence. The OBR some time ago said that if businesses across Britain do so equally, then it would add 0.5% to productivity. That would be a £27 billion of fiscal headroom for the Exchequer. Now, we set about doing so because that's the way we break out of the inheritance of the Conservative government with high tax and low growth, but we want to invest in that future, and small businesses will be at the forefront. The great thing about AI and digital technology is it presents the kind of power into the hands of small businesses that until date has only been in reach of large businesses. That is a huge opportunity, and I hope business people running SMEs across the country grab it with both hands.
Sir John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister this morning spoke about the government wanting to develop a clear and trusted copyright regime, which is, I think, what many in the creative industries thought we already had. When he comes to consider the recommendation in Matt Clifford's report that there should be a reform of the text and data mining regime, will the consultation look at potentially strengthening IP protection rather than weakening it?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for the question. He is a persistent advocate of the issues that he's raising today. But I do just gently say to him that if the current regime, legal regime, was so satisfactory, there wouldn't be so many court cases that are outstanding on this precise issue. Clearly, it is struggling to keep up with the time that we are living in. What we want to do is make sure that, yes, we do strengthen the rights of people creating, using creative industries, and all of the great potential that has for individual copyrighted material. We want to strengthen it into the future, but get it right for the future. And that's why we're thinking about the needs, the demands and the opportunities of the future, and making sure the settlement for those creating digital, AI and creative industries, products and services benefit equally as we go forward and have the assertion of the law.
Emily Darlington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I am equally excited by the opportunities that being a leader in AI can bring to the people of the UK. He will know that Milton Keynes has been a leader right from its outset, with Bletchley Park creating the birthplace of machine learning and AI, but also Milton Keynes businesses are leading, especially in arts, services, transport, and the heart of our security services efforts are based there, as well as our skills base, including the Institute for Technology, Cranfield and the Open University. Will he meet with me and other AI champions from Milton Keynes to come up with actions to make this plan a reality for the people in Milton Keynes?
Secretary of State.
One of the things I've noticed visiting Silicon Valley 3 times in the last year is that the constituent parts that make Silicon Valley so magical when it comes to innovation and the upscaling of it exist here in the UK, but we're just not bringing it together and using it in the right way. She has just identified many of those constituent elements for Milton Keynes. They have a great champion in her because they do need to be coordinated better in order to fully exploit the opportunities of the future. I hope that I can be the partner in this government and my department can be the partner that she needs, and I look forward to meeting with her and her stakeholders.
Lisa Smart.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very much agree with the sentiments of the Secretary of State about the opportunities that AI present to my constituents in Hazel Grove, but with any opportunity often comes risk. So I wonder if the Secretary of State could update the House on any conversations he's had with colleagues from the Home Office about ensuring that police are properly trained and equipped and resourced to deal with crime that's brought about maybe by deep fakes, misinformation or disinformation.
Secretary of State.
She raises a very good point, and I can assure her that we are indeed in touch with the Home Office, as we are with every frontline public service department, to make sure that AI is used, the potential is embraced. But as I said before, safety has to be the first step, protection has to be the first step, so that the public can be reassured that we are using this technology wisely and in their interests.
Clive Efford.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome my right honourable friend's statement, and future AI is going to be central to the future of our public services, and particularly in improving productivity in public services. So can my right honourable friend say just exactly what the government's going to be doing to assist our public services in taking advantage of the opportunities that AI offers.
Secretary of State.
I'm really grateful for my honourable friend's question. He is absolutely right. The thing about AI is it's not a singular technology, it is a general purpose technology. So just in health alone, AI is already being used in hospitals such as Huddersfield for radiography departments to make sure that scanning is more precise, you can detect early patterns quicker so you get to disease quicker, and also productivity is increasing, in their case from 700 to 1,000 scans a week. But simultaneously, it is also ensuring that in the test pilots that we have going, that doctors' time is used more wisely, using digital technology to create a more human experience because doctors can spend more time with patients. This is what happens when you use AI and digital technology wisely. This is why, unlike the previous government, we won't sit on the sidelines and let the market do the business as it sees fit. We will use the power of government, the agency that comes with that, to ensure that this technology is used for the benefit of all.
Lincoln Jock.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I don't know whether the Secretary of State has had a moment to read the Times this morning, but it reports that the Chancellor is using a new AI tool in order to answer her emails, and that it is 70% accurate, performing, and I quote, as good or better than existing processes. Which doesn't say a great deal for the ability of the Chancellor to answer her own emails, but be that as it may, could the Secretary of State please reassure us that any AI tool being used across government means that any statement brought to this dispatch box by the Chancellor is 100% accurate?
Secretary of State.
I'm very grateful for the question. I can assure him that we are piloting and developing and hoping to deploy AI across government to drive efficiencies, effectiveness, and serve the people of this country better than ever before, and certainly better and more efficiently and effectively than they experienced under the previous 14 years.
Steve Race.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. Can you set out what role he envisages the digital centre of government will play in driving AI adoption across public services and departments to benefit my residents next to specifically? Thank you.
True State.
I'm really grateful, and there will be many benefits experienced by the whole programme of this government when it comes to digital technology for the people of Exeter. We have created the Digital Centre of Government because previously digital services were dispersed across government, always often buying off the shelf products and services from big providers because the capacity didn't exist within government as to either understand, to develop, deploy and programme services within in-house. We now have a powerful centre of government that is a digital centre of government, which is working alongside tech companies and often developing in-house. And I'm really excited that in the days and weeks that lie ahead, not months and years, days and weeks that lie ahead, we will be announcing to the public more about what the digital service is delivering for citizens across this country.
John Glenn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I draw the House's attention to my register of members' interests. I welcome the government's ambition in this space, but one area of significant challenge to many tech companies that I've observed and invested in over 20 years has been the ecosystem of investment in the UK. Can I urge the Secretary of State to work closely with his colleague, the member from Wickham, who is undertaking valuable work on pensions reforms, so that we can actually intensify the understanding in the city of the opportunities that exist in this new sector, particularly at Series C and before, where there is a gap and it has a meaningful impact on the growth potential of so many businesses across this country.
Secretary of State.
The Honourable Gentleman raises an incredibly pertinent point. He mentions one of the great challenges. There are many challenges that I perceive in this agenda, which is why we are striving so hard to get as much progress as we can. One of the key barriers to not just upscaling innovation in this country, but keeping innovation in this country is making sure that the investment landscape is fulsome enough, it is swift enough, not just from spin out and scale up, but when you get to that point where you do need the further rounds of investment that he mentions, sometimes into the hundreds of millions of pounds, sometimes taking time to actually become profitable, taking that kind of investment risk is essential. I can assure him that the Chancellor and the Member for High Wycombe are both working intensively on pension reform. We did so from a position of opposition. We are carrying on the Mansion House process. We want to make sure that the investment landscape in this country is world class. And right now we have some work to do, but we are getting there.
Tracy Gilbert.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased that today's action plan referenced the expertise and development that already exists in AI in Edinburgh, and it's understandable that the government had to cancel a number of unfunded projects from the last administration. However, can my right honourable friend work with stakeholders to ensure that the ambitions in Edinburgh to develop an exascale computer are at the heart of a long-term plan that the government announced and will bring forward in the next 6 months?
Secretary of State.
At last, there is a great advocate there for a sustainable, fully funded, fully costed compute landscape for our country. And that is something that we have begun announcing in today's plan. Into the spring, I will announce further strategy on compute. I want to make sure that we have the right, resilient, sustainable investment that our country needs when it comes to public compute. We have committed today to increasing our public compute by a factor of 20 in the next 5 years. That shows the scale of ambition, but she can rest assured that when we make announcements for the compute needs of our country, and particularly when it involves individual institutions, it will be fully costed, it will be fully funded, and it will be delivered.
Pete Wishart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. People in our world-class creative sector will not be in the least bit reassured by the Minister this afternoon. Our artists face the real prospect of their wonderful works being ingested by AI companies without recompense or even their permission. Now, we know that we have this consultation ongoing, but what people want to hear is the Minister's view, his intention when it comes to copyright. Can he reassure people who are listening to this today that our wonderful copyright regime will remain in place at the end of this process?
Secretary of State.
We are already on record as saying we want more licensing of copyrighted material, not less. His characterisation is a mischaracterisation of the intentions of this government. The consultation is there. We want to hear from people. We will deliver a way forward that harnesses all of the opportunities of the creative industries into the future, not based on the past. And we will allow AI companies to come here, invest into the future. We do not need to pit both sectors against each other. We should celebrate as a country that we have an economy as diverse that can have the best of both sectors, world-class sectors in both AI technology and creative arts. That's something we celebrate, but seem to be the only party in this House that does.
Florence Eshalomi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the Secretary of State's statement this afternoon, and I know that he takes this really seriously. He was at my constituency just before Christmas. It's a shame he didn't go into the PET scanner, though. And I also welcome some of the concerns in terms of and improvements in terms of education for many parents who have to battle with Google Classroom. If they forget the password, like me, I hope AI can resolve that. One of the issues with AI is that mistrust from some communities, particularly BME communities, who are worried about their data and what that data will be used for. How's the Secretary of State going to work with certain communities, including many communities in my constituency and other diverse constituencies, to build up that public trust and confidence that their data will be used in an ethical and safe manner?
Secretary of State.
Yes, my honourable friend makes the most important point, and I am determined and have said publicly numerous times that equity will be built into the technology and the policies of this government from the outset. When she reads the reports, when she hears the words of this government, when she listens to the Prime Minister, I hope she is reassured that for this government, we want to make sure that everyone from every background feels the ability to connect and work within the tech sector here to create the technology of the future, but also benefit equally from the products that come out the other side, including being able to use products intuitively and benefit from the wealth that is created from them. And when it comes to using public data, I realise that there are parts of this country, there are communities here that we need to be taken on a longer journey and need to be more reassured as we go forward. And I fully commit to doing so as we go forward.
Kagan Mohindra.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome Matt Clifford's action plan? But in it refers to data centres. As the Secretary of State may be aware, in my constituency, Kings Langley, the Deputy Prime Minister is currently reviewing the need for a data centre there. But the report and the Secretary of State did talk about making sure that the infrastructure was in the right place. I'm working alongside my constituency, Kings Langley, because that particular site is prime greenbelt. If there is a need to actually build and develop on it, housing would make better sense, because things like energy, which would be a huge issue for data centres, and requirement for data centres, is not nearby. How can the Secretary of State ensure that we are not just encouraging white elephants to be built in the wrong place?
Secretary of State.
Thank you. I can assure him that the energy needs and the other constituent needs of data centres are being taken into the strategic planning of our country at last. We have created the AI Energy Council that is jointly chaired by the Energy Secretary and myself, and the planning reforms will mean that we can expedite the investment into the data centres. He should be aware that not only are data centres a singular investment, but very often other innovations, other industries, other businesses will cluster around it. So when it comes to heat that he mentioned, often community heat networks can stem and flow from these kinds of investments. If there is the right local leadership, if there is the planning in place, and if there is the vision to make sure that our country benefits the most. We have that vision. And I implore him to start getting involved with the issues locally and shaping what unfolds for the digital infrastructure of the future, so it benefits absolutely everyone, because this is a potential source of sustainable, good, quality wealth creation and job creation into the future. I suggest his party gets on board and grabs it with both hands, rather than talking down the agenda we're putting forward today.
Catherine Fuchs. Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Secretary of State, for your statement today. I'm delighted that Vantage Data Centres are working to build one of Europe's largest data centre campuses in Wales, and plans to invest over £12 billion in data centres across the UK, creating 11,500 jobs. This is, of course, great news for our government's economic growth mission. Can the Secretary of State therefore provide some insights as to what this will mean for areas like Monmouthshire, my constituency? Thank you. Secretary of State.
I'm very grateful already. She can see the benefits from the investment that's there, and because she is positive and she is engaging and thinking deeply about the potential benefits from this kind of investment. Incidentally, investment that's happening right now, not into the future, right now. She will be best placed to help steer this for the benefit of all. People of Monmouthshire are very grateful to have her, just as we are very grateful to have her in the House as a champion for these issues.
Sir Julian Lewis.
May I revert to the article in the Times mentioned by my honourable and gallant friend for Spelthorne, and headed, I quote, "Rachel Reeves using AI to reply to Treasury emails."
Even if the honourable gentleman's quoting from the newspaper, I preferred if he didn't use the Chancellor's name.
I beg your pardon, Madam Deputy Speaker. I didn't want to misquote the headline. Nevertheless, as we all know now who she is, I discover that instead of corresponding with a civil servant, as I thought, I'm now engaging with something called a correspondence triage automation tool, which is used for the automatic matching of correspondence with appropriate standard responses. Now, that might give us a cause to chuckle, but can we at least have an assurance that when we do write to ministers, even if they're not replying, they will at least be informed of the fact that concerns have been raised by members of this House?
Secretary of State.
I can assure the honourable gentleman that ministers are fully engaged with corresponding with members across this House. Having been a backbencher for so long in opposition, I can assure you that I strive to be a lot better than I experienced in so many of those years.
Can I just remind the Secretary of State that we don't use you in the chamber, and please can questions and answers be brief. I'd like to get everybody in before 6 o'clock, please. Andrew Peggs.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State and his team for their vision and leadership on this critical issue. These are indeed exciting plans that could help us drive growth, create jobs and improve public services. Places like Peterborough that I represent could be at the heart of the Silicon Fens if we get this right. Critical to that will be the issue of skills in cities like mine, cities that have been left behind for too long by the previous government. Can the Secretary of State update and inform us what progress his department is making in assessing the UK skills gap when it comes to AI, and how we ensure that growth will benefit all parts of the country as we embark on this plan?
My older friend from Peterborough is absolutely right. He said if we choose to. He is right, and this government does choose to, and that means engaging with the Education Secretary on the skills agenda, and it means being absolutely determined that every community from across the United Kingdom has equal access to the potential this technology provides.
Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Secretary of State will know, as a neighbouring MP of mine, the convergence of the University of Sussex's AI expertise with sustainable power from Rampion Wind Farm and the expertise of computer power from Universal Quantum based in Haywards Heath creates an ideal ecosystem for supporting the UK government's ambitious AI strategy. Does the Minister agree with me that our corner of Sussex is a strong contender as a potential hub for sustainable AI development? And will he meet with me to discuss these opportunities?
Secretary of State.
It won't be a surprise to her or the House that I agree with the championing of Sussex. Sussex University, for which I went to myself and am an alumni, their AI centre, research centre, was established in the 1960s. It shows just how long the heritage of scientific endeavour when it comes to digital technology has been in full flow in this country. And of course, I look forward to meeting her, perhaps down in sunny Sussex.
Jacob Collier.
Madam Deputy Speaker, AI offers immense potential for driving economic growth, but it also presents challenges for post-industrial areas like my constituency of Burton and Uttoxeter, including the risk of job displacement, skill shortages, infrastructure gaps, as well as concerns around public trust and the impact on communities. Can the Secretary of State outline how the government is addressing these challenges to ensure that AI delivers highly skilled, sustainable jobs and long-term benefits for regions like mine in the Midlands?
Secretary of State.
I can assure him that the communities to which he is referring are absolutely front and centre in the way we envisage using the power of government to steer this technology for the good of all. It is essential that communities like his benefit positively, not just after what they've experienced in the past, where wave after wave of revolution negatively impact communities such as his. That will not happen on our watch.
John Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I make no apologies for returning to this question of copyright, because this is absolutely vital here. Notwithstanding the consultation, the plan recommends that we follow Europe with an opt-out model. Does the Secretary of State not agree with me and with the News Media Association that that would be a watering down of our exemplary copyright laws?
Exactly. Secretary of State.
We've put forward the proposals for an entire package for which we are consulting on. He's referencing one part of it. If you see it in its whole, then I think he will see that we are striving to make sure that all of those competing challenges that we have right now, because of the benefits and the opportunities that we have in modern Britain, are taken care of.
Serena Brackenridge.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that AI is not going away? Instead, isn't it best for the UK to lead the development, lead best practice and ensure that AI systems are safe for my constituents in Wolverhampton North East?
Secretary of State.
She is absolutely right. This technology is not going away. The choice that this government has made is just not to sit on the sidelines like the previous Conservative government for the last 14 years. We will use safety to positively explore all the potential that AI has for our country, our economy, and for communities like hers. And I am very grateful for her attitude in this debate, in this statement, because this is the way that communities like hers will benefit so much from the next wave of industrial progress.
Jim Allister.
Secretary of State makes clear his ambition to make the United Kingdom the frontier home of choice for AI firms, and he hopes to see a significant increase in data centres. I trust his ambition is fulfilled, but the Republic of Ireland, our neighbours, has been very successful in securing multiple data centres. And the primary reason they've been successful is because of their very competitive corporation tax rate. isn't a competitive corporation tax rate the missing component in bringing all this together?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for his question. I got to Northern Ireland as soon as I could after appointment to this job, but I have to just correct him on one point. We have attracted £24 billion worth of investment into this country in AI since taking office, and then just this week alone, an additional £14 billion. I think what that tells the House is that the missing ingredient wasn't what he said. The missing ingredient was a Labour government.
Matt Rodder.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and may I welcome the Secretary of State's statement today. I wholeheartedly support the close work with the private sector and the investments in AI and data centres. Would he like to say a little bit more about the work he's doing to encourage more small businesses to benefit from AI? And in particular, will he consider Reading to be a potential hub?
Secretary of State.
I really look forward to Reading getting involved and coming forward with us to offer to partner to get the kind of investment into great places like Reading. I know that Reading has a lot of great small businesses. Small businesses could benefit the most. Small businesses that sometimes might feel like they're tucked away in communities up and down the country actually can enter the global stage because of the technology that's now before us. Our job as a government is to make sure that the infrastructure is there and all of the technology is accessible to them as it is for big companies.
Saqib Bhatti.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We should be under no illusion that the U-turn on supercompute is exactly that. We committed £1.3 billion. They cancelled it. So can the Secretary of State now tell the House? Can the Secretary of State now tell the House how much money has been allocated has been set aside to achieve his supercompute ambitions?
Secretary of State.
Well, I do admire the way they just pushed through with this, but they didn't commit a single penny to a single one of the projects that he mentioned then. You know what this is? They want all the benefits of our budget, but they won't say how they will pay for it. What he is asking me to do is actually cut 800 million or 1.3 billion pounds of existing revenue, perhaps cut thousands of research grants to universities, thousands of PhD students to pay for the project that his government announced but didn't commit a single penny to.
Chris MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State mentioned the benefits to industrial communities such as Stockton North. Does he agree with me that this commitment to artificial intelligence will lead to more investment in data-intensive heavy industries such as chemicals and life sciences? And can I warmly invite him to visit the Billingham Chemicals Cluster in my constituency if he wishes to see industrial AI in action?
Secretary of State.
He couldn't be more right. Not only is AI going to improve the investment landscape for the physical infrastructure, it is going to mean that technological advances in all sorts of different industries, including in those who are chemistry dependent, are going to be absolutely profound. I am so glad they have an MP that recognises this, is on their side and is sticking up for them today in the British Parliament.
Mike Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's clear that AI brings great opportunities and also some dangers, and nowhere is that more clear than in the military realm where, well, put simply, an algorithm can help you make a decision about who you want to kill, and the quicker you can do that, the more of an advantage that gives to your side. On the other side of the ledger, of course, if you kill the wrong person, our entire legal and ethical framework for how we conduct war disappears. Could the Secretary of State give the House a broad outline of the discussions that he's having with the Ministry of Defence about this really important international issue?
Secretary of State.
He does raise an incredibly important point. I can reassure him that we have the world-class defence industry in this country. We have world-class defensive capabilities within the Ministry of Defence, and we have a government that is determined to make sure that not just digital technology and AI, but all evolving technology is used ethically and appropriately in the defence of our nation. I can also assure him that the Prime Minister has written to each government department asking for their plans on digital progress and harnessing the power safely of digital technology, and I can also assure him that my department and that of the Ministry of Defence is in touch with each other.
Andrew Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And at the risk of disagreeing with some of my colleagues, it's surely Mid-Cheshire that's leading the way on AI innovation in the North West, with a number of companies working on some game-changing applications. I want to make particular mention of Safety Shield in Winsford, who won a King's Award for Enterprise for their AI model that's been 10 years in the making and is keeping construction workers safe on sites all over the world. The action plan talks about the potential of post-industrial constituencies like mine to act as key drivers for regional growth as AI growth zones. Can the Secretary of State say more about how areas can work with the government to get AI growth zones up and running and how soon he expects them to be operational?
Secretary of State.
I'm very grateful for him sharing the example of in his constituency. I can also say that in the coming weeks we will release the details of how local communities can get involved, can apply to become AI growth zones, and I'm really looking forward to seeing his.
Chris Law.
Madam Deputy Speaker, over the summer the UK Labour Government cancelled £1.3 billion worth of investments in tech and AI projects, including £800 million for the next generation exascale supercomputer at the University of Edinburgh. The UK Government described this project as making, and I quote, little strategic sense. Yet today has now pledged to turbocharge AI, including plans to build a brand new, wait for it, supercomputer. So can the Secretary tell me, on the back of the fact there's new investment and the University of Edinburgh has been at the centre of research and development of AI for more than 60 years, whether the new supercomputer will now be located at Edinburgh?
Secretary of State.
I just make the basic point again because I think he needs to hear it again. You can't cut something that doesn't exist. I did not cut something because it did not exist. What I have done is extended the existing supercomputer for another year so that people have the reassurance that the capabilities that are needed via Edinburgh University are there. In that time, I am making sure that I'm working on a strategy that will have resilience. Why will it have resilience? Because it will be fully costed, fully planned, and fully funded, so that those people who need to know the strategic opportunities of our country will have the certainty they need now and into the long term from spring when we have the strategy released.
Catherine Atkinson.
A barrier to the growth of data centres for AI are their need for power. Rolls-Royce in Derby are at the forefront of small modular and micro reactors. SMRs are small enough to be on or next to data centre sites, and micro-reactors are the size of a shipping container. Co-location would also mean less vulnerability to grid failure and cyber attacks. Would the Secretary work with the Department of Energy Security to explore how these could provide the clean energy solution needed to support sovereign AI capabilities?
I'm very grateful for her question. It is very pertinent. You can see the investment going into new sources of energy from investors around the world. I am really pleased that we have Rolls-Royce. I met them just before the election up in Coventry and saw some of their capabilities and heard some of their ambitions. I can assure her that the AI Energy Council, jointly chaired by myself and the Energy Secretary, will take into consideration these sorts of issues and make sure that these innovations are considered, engaged with by this government, because we want to make sure we're at the forefront, not just of the data infrastructure, but all of the related industries for which our country can benefit and be at the forefront of.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as it seems that AI is going to be a capability that will be used positively going forward, can the Minister perhaps explain how this plan will advance areas such as healthcare? And does the Minister see this as a way of reducing backlogs within the NHS, such as waiting lists and booking systems? And can the Minister confirm that all regions of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland can and will play their part and gain the benefit of AI? Thank you, Secretary.
I'm always very, very grateful for his contributions and have enjoyed working with him in opposition and now in government. AI poses enormous potential for productivity, but also innovation, for medical advancements in treatments and medicine for the health service. I can also assure him that we are striving, myself and the Health Secretary doing many visits together to try and understand how we can work together to have technology developed and implemented throughout the NHS. I've also been in touch with the Northern Ireland Assembly to try and think of the way forward so that this administration here in Westminster can partner with the Northern Ireland government and make sure that we can get Northern Ireland benefiting, because I know that there are specific challenges with the waiting lists there.
Gordon McKee.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I agree with the Secretary of State's praise of Matt Clifford, who has produced a top-class report. Now, when it comes to building data centres for training AI models, you need two things ideally: lots of energy and ideally cold weather. Fortunately, Scotland has both of those in abundance. So can I ask the Secretary of State whether he can ensure that one of the AI growth zones is in Scotland?
I'm not going to engage in the weather, coming from Brighton, which is the sunniest mainland city in the UK, but thank you for letting me get onto the record. I can assure him that we want all parts of the United Kingdom to benefit. I was in touch with the Finance Minister for the Scottish authorities, the Scottish Government, just last week. I am determined that all parts of the United Kingdom benefit, and that fully includes Scotland. They are very lucky to have him in here championing the cause of Scotland and celebrating its potential.
Jonathan Brash.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Progress in this area will be incredibly energy dependent. Does my railway friend therefore agree with me that we need to speed up the rollout of small and advanced modular reactors to meet that demand? And given its history, its skill set and its location, Hartlepool presents a perfect opportunity for this type of investment.
I can assure him that we are striving to make sure that innovation of all kinds is expedited. That's why I established the Office of Regulatory Innovation in DCIT. We're already piloting 4 areas of policy so that we can get innovation off the drawing board into the economy, benefiting the health and the wealth of the nation as quickly as possible. And I can assure you, we are wasting no time to get that done.
We're into Just.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Secretary of State's statement this afternoon. As he states, the AI revolution is taking place now, and it will make significant improvements in the promotion of public services and businesses. However, would he please be able to reassure my constituents in Wolverhampton West what specific steps he will take to ensure that AI is safe in every possible way?
The work of the AI Safety Institute is ongoing. It is doing world-class work. When we move forward, of course, AI is fueled by data, and we know that the public need reassurance that data will be used safely. I can assure him, with a data bill going through, with a government that wants to ensure that people have the rights that they need to ensure they have control of their data, that both use of data and use of technology and use of AI and also use of the algorithms that are increasingly being used in the private sector but also being used in government. Unlike the previous government, I want to make sure that algorithms are published by government departments so that everybody can understand what it is that we are doing in their interests to benefit the country. Because without understanding it, people will not feel safe it being used. And I will not tolerate that, because we need to make sure that we as a country are using this technology for the public good.
Mark Stewards.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the Secretary of State's leadership on AI? It's good to have someone taking this seriously. Now, as somebody who was teaching in a classroom this time a year ago, I'm always interested in the application of AI in the classroom, especially when it comes to reducing teacher workload so that they can spend more face-to-face time with their students. I'm also interested in the application of AI in creating personalised learning resources for students based on their ability. Can the Secretary of State speak about this in a bit more detail and also potentially tell us about the timelines this can be rolled out in all of our schools?
I'm very grateful that he has brought his experience from the classroom into the chamber and the debates such as this. As somebody who experiences neurological challenges and barriers to learning as a child and through life, one of the most exciting parts of the digital revolution, the AI revolution that's unfolding, is if we harness this correctly, you can have one classroom where students who have barriers to learning and others that have specific talents that need stretching and challenging can exist. And now, of course, there is no replacement for great teaching. There is no replacement for people and teachers in the classroom working with students. But with the assistance of digital technology, with what AI can do to provide a granular, detailed, tailored experience for students, this is something we are working at, and my department is working with the Department of Education so that we can get this technology into classrooms, and as he says, for the benefit of all students right around the United Kingdom.
Joe Powell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On Friday, I visited a major national grid upgrade project in my constituency of Kensington and Bayswater that will connect to a huge new data centre in northwest London. The Secretary of State's talked about the additional energy infrastructure needed, but how will he work to speed up the planning system, including taking on those that seek to block this critical new infrastructure so we can really harness the benefits?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We certainly saved a great question for the last question in this statement. We are absolutely determined. This plan that we put forward today, and let me express my gratitude one final time to Matt Clifford for doing this report, to fully embrace this technology, we need to get a lot right. We need to get regulation right, and yes, we need to get planning right. We are already undertaking a huge reform of our planning system, the biggest for well over a generation. That will include the ability for government locally and centrally to make sure that investment into the industries of the future and the infrastructure of the future is expedited. It faces no barriers so that it can be put to the common good for the good of our country and its citizens without delay.
Can I thank the Secretary of State for that statement, which brings us to live events, ticketing, resale and pricing consultation. Sir Chris Bryant.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. With permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to make a statement about ticketing in the live events sector. In the words of the musical Hamilton, there is nothing quite like being in the room where it happens. I would hazard a guess that every single one of us here today can remember the first time we went to a live event. My first rugby international was Wales versus Scotland at Murrayfield, aged 12. The food was terrible. My first live gig was U2's The Joshua Tree at Wembley Arena. These moments of shared passion are part of what makes us the people that we really are. As Gloria Gaynor said, there's nothing to compare with live music. There just isn't anything. No wonder live events are so highly prized. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, for far too long, ticket touts have leached off fans' passion. In the past, it was spivs in long raincoats at the gates. Nowadays, it's a trade made all the more pernicious by the internet, which enables modern-day touts hiding behind multiple false identities to hoover up tickets and sell them at vastly inflated prices. It's indefensible. It trades off other people's hopes, and it doesn't return a single penny to the artists, the performers, the venue, the industry, or the sport. We said we would tackle this, and that's precisely what we're doing. On Friday, the Department for Business and Trade and the Department for Culture, Media and Sport published a consultation on the resale of live events tickets and a separate call for evidence on pricing practices in the live events sector. It's not a consultation on whether to act, it's a consultation on precisely how we should act. The UK, let's face it, has a world-leading live events sector. Our artists, festivals and venues bring joy to audiences across the country. Last year, the sector employed over 200,000 people, contributing to local economies up and down the country, from stage technicians and sound engineers to venue staff and promoters. Every event, whether it's at a major stadium event or an intimate gig at a grassroots venue, injects life into local communities and economies, supporting small businesses and generating significant revenue for our towns and cities. It is musicians, performers and athletes who make these events what they are and create the value that sits behind them, not the ticket touts. Live events are a catalyst for creativity too, where artists have a platform to hone their craft and relate directly to audiences as well as earn a living. Live performances create unforgettable shared experiences that transcend cultural and social boundaries, uniting communities up and down the country and shaping our national identity. However, too many fans are missing out on opportunities to experience these live events. Put simply, the ticketing market is not working for fans. The government recognises that a well-functioning ticket resale market can play an important role. For instance, allowing those who cannot attend an event to give someone else the opportunity to go in their place. But far too often, tickets are listed on the resale market at extortionate prices, many multiples of the face value. Just one example, standing tickets for Charlie XCX's current UK tour were originally priced at £54, but they've been listed on ticket resale sites for as much as £400. That's enough, as she herself would put it, to shock you like defibrillators. This so-called scalping is the work of organised touts who are systematically buying up tickets in bulk on the primary market, then reselling them to fans at hugely inflated prices. This government is committed to putting fans back at the heart of live events and to clamping down on unfair, exploitative practices. In doing so, we want fairness for fans and an economically successful live event sector. We made a manifesto commitment to act on this, and that is precisely what we will do. That is why we have launched a consultation as the first major step towards delivering on this ambition. We want to take action in an effective, proportionate and responsible way, ensuring any new protections work for fans and for the live event sector. The consultation outlines a range of options to address ongoing problems. We are revisiting recommendations from the Competition and Market Authority's 2021 report on secondary ticketing that were not taken forward by the previous government. This includes a licensing regime for resale platforms, new limits on the number of tickets individual resellers can list, and new requirements on platforms to ensure the accuracy of information about tickets listed for sale on their websites. We are also keen to tackle scalping, that is to say, for-profit resales of tickets above their face value. That is why we are considering a statutory price cap on ticket resales, as seen in many other countries. Its purpose would be to break the business model of organised touts by prohibiting resale at vastly inflated prices. In the consultation, we ask how a price cap should be designed and implemented so as to deliver a genuine sea change in the ticketing landscape to the benefit of fans and the live event sector, and whether it should be at face value only or plus 10, 20 or 30%. Madam Deputy Speaker, there is one other aspect which we might call the oasis moment, on which we are seeking evidence. The live event sector has adopted new approaches to selling tickets in recent years, including the use of new pricing strategies and technologies such as dynamic pricing. I want to be absolutely clear, not all dynamic pricing is harmful. Fans often take advantage of early bird tickets and last-minute price reductions. That is absolutely fine, and we have no intention to stop it. The key thing is that fans are treated fairly and openly, with timely, transparent and accurate information being presented ahead of sales. So as to better understand these changes and challenges faced by fans, we are publishing a call for evidence on pricing practices in the live events sector. The consultation and call for evidence will be open for 12 weeks. We strongly encourage all interested stakeholders, including fans, artists and performers, ticketing platforms and the wider live event sector, to respond. Once the consultation is complete, we will decide on next steps, but be in no doubt we intend to act. We have a world-class live events sector in the UK, but, Madam Deputy Speaker, we don't have a secondary ticket market to match. In the words of T-Rex, it's a rip-off, such a rip-off. To the fans, the performers and the touts, let me be crystal clear, we will clamp down on unfair practices in the secondary market. The question is not whether, but how we improve protection for fans. I commend this statement to the House.
Minister Sakit Bhatti.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the honourable gentleman for advance sight of his statement. Madam Deputy Speaker, as the honourable gentleman said, dynamic pricing is a strategy used across many industries outside the creative sectors, including hotels, taxis and airlines. It can offer significant benefits to consumers when prices are lowered, for example, through early bird tickets or late ticketing. The government is right to emphasise the importance of transparency. But Oasis fans, and I'm one of them, we know that we didn't have the necessary information up front. So I understand that the Competition and Markets Authority is rightly investigating this episode. However, in my view, new regulations should only be considered when they are necessary, proportionate, and do not duplicate existing rules. Current legislation already states that while dynamic pricing is legal, it must be implemented transparently. So I can assure the Minister that we will consider carefully any proposals that could strengthen, improve, or simplify the market for fans. But I also warn him, we will oppose regulation when it is just introduced for the sake of being new regulation. The secondary ticket resale market plays an important role for artists, fans and venues. It can provide a safer way to transfer unwanted tickets, ensuring that seats are not left empty at venues. The Minister claims in his consultation that his reforms will better protect fans, improve access to live events and support the creative sectors. He claims that these proposals will give power back to fans and prevent them from being fleeced by ticket touts. However, we know that this isn't true. We know that Labour's plans will harm artists, they will harm fans restrictions, and they will harm venues and make those live events even harder to attend. First, let's discuss, he wants to know, I'll tell him. First, let's discuss price caps on resale tickets. The government's consultation proposes capping ticket resale prices to somewhere between the original price and a 30% uplift. On the surface, this might seem like a reasonable measure, but we know that this will lead to an upsurge in black market activity and more money flowing into the pockets of ticket touts. In fact, price controls would lead to a surge in unregulated, illegal transactions, leaving fans with little to no consumer protections. He might not believe me as a free marketeer, but the Computer and Communications Industry Association, who in response to the government's consultation warned that draconian regulation targeting only the secondary market will only mean more tickets changing hands in informal settings without the same protections that exist in proper marketplaces. So I regret to say that the government's proposed measures to increase regulation of resale websites and apps and to raise fines for rules violations will not prevent fans from turning to underground markets. We've already seen this in Victoria, Australia, where a 10% profit cap failed to prevent significant markup on ticket prices and even led to a spike in ticket scams. And now we know that scams are already a serious issue in the secondary ticket market. For example, the Minister will be aware that according to Lloyds Bank, Taylor Swift fans lost an estimated £1 million in ticket scams ahead of her tour. So I asked the Minister, if his policy recommendation would be in place, how much more would be lost by fans to scammers? We also know that there's a ticket resale cap will lead to empty seats and the prevention of spontaneous ticket purchases. We saw this at the Paris Olympics, where restrictions on the resale of tickets left empty seats at many venues. And empty seats aren't just bad for artists, they're also bad for the economy. Events at stadiums and venues provide a boost for local businesses, including restaurants, bars, and other hospitality venues. And let's be clear, the hospitality industry is already under a lot of strain, not least because of the budget of broken promises, their national insurance job tax, and the slashing of rates, which the Music Venue Trust has already warned that will place an immediate risk of closure on many, many businesses, representing the potential loss of more than 12,000 jobs, £250 million in market activity, and the loss of over 75,000 live music events. And let's be clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, the reason we're here today is because the spin doctors at Number 10 were trying to move the news cycle away from a beleaguered Prime Minister, a Chancellor already drowning in the debt markets, and an anti-corruption Minister being investigated for corruption. All the while this department and this government throw the creative industries and hospitality businesses under the bus.
Minister.
Lordy, lordy, lordy. I mean, he says he's an Oasis fan. But to be honest, the way he talks about the last Tory government, I think he must have been a Nirvana fan. Because everything was absolutely perfect, wasn't it, when he was a minister? Look, let me first of all just put something right. He seems to think that our call for evidence on dynamic pricing is about all sorts of different industries. This is only about the live event sector. We're not talking about the tourism industry. We're not talking about hotels and how they fill, or taxis or anything like that. We're solely talking about the live event sector. We recognise that that wasn't part of our manifesto commitment, so we do want to hear what people's evidence is and whether there are further measures that we need to take. But I think the one thing that I could say confidently is that it does seem horribly unfair when you're logged in, you're in the system, and you see the price of the ticket going up 120, 125, 130, 135, because that creates a sort of sense of panic in you that you've got to buy. And it's perfectly legitimate to consider whether that's a good way of selling tickets and whether it's fair to consumers. So that's a legitimate question to ask. I can't comment on the Oasis situation. He knows perfectly well that there's an investigation by the CMA. Let me just, however, correct the other point. He kept on saying, we know that this, that and the other will happen. Well, we don't, for a start. But more importantly, let me just explain to him what we're really trying to tackle. It's this thing where Becky, who lives, I don't know, flat 23, number 75, the High Street, is desperate to get 2 tickets for her mum's favourite band for her mum's birthday coming up later that year. She's absolutely desperate, so she logs on at 9 o'clock, she's logging on, she can see the tickets selling and her not managing to get into the system. She's desperate about it, and then 20 past 9, all the tickets are gone, and then lo and behold, 21 minutes past 9, you can get them on the secondary ticket market. for vastly inflated prices. That's what we're trying to tackle. It's a very simple problem, and there are loads of countries in the world. He just referred to one country, but France, Italy, Ireland, Poland, Portugal, Norway, Japan, Belgium, most of Canada, most of Australia, Israel, and several states in the United States all have simple measures in place. We want to make sure that we tackle that very simple problem, because in the end, I just think that the value is created by the artists themselves and by the passion of the fans. It shouldn't then go into pockets that in the main are not based in this country and certainly haven't contributed anything to the creation of the value in the first place.
Sharon Hodgson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Having campaigned on this issue for over 15 years, I have reached three main conclusions. Firstly, the cap on resale should be set as low as possible. For example, face value plus 5% or 10% to take the incentive out of scalping, or simply follow the Irish model and prohibit resale for profit altogether. Secondly, many of these touts and resale sites are based overseas. Therefore, this legislation must be supranational. Finally, any crackdown on this black market must be fully enforced, unlike the current situation, where prosecutions are few and far between, there's been a handful, 6 at most. Does the Minister agree?
I agree that she's campaigned for 15 years, because I think I've heard nearly every speech that she's made on the subject, and she's been absolutely magnificent. I pay tribute to her over the years. I think there are many artists in this country who would be grateful for the work that she's done on this, because so often they're caught in a completely invidious situation. They see tickets going for absolutely preposterous prices. I looked earlier at StubHub. They're selling Dua Lipa tickets for Wembley on the 20th of June, face value £81.45 for £2,417. And if you want to go see Jimmy Carr, this is Viagogo, if you want to see Jimmy Carr at Milton Keynes in 2 days' time, face value ticket £60, on Viagogo £202. That's the kind of problem that we've got to deal with. She's absolutely right about supranational issues. This doesn't just apply in the UK. It's difficult for us to prevent them selling tickets for Olivia Rodrigo concerts in Mexico, but we can make sure that for Olivia Rodrigo concerts in the UK that this does apply, and she's absolutely right about the point about enforcement. That's why we're looking at whether there should be a licensing regime, and if so, precisely how that should work. But she's made the point in many speeches before, I'll reiterate for her, which is that we have hardly seen any prosecutions whatsoever under the complex set of rules that there are at the moment, and that's one of the things that we've got to fix.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Ian Sollom.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I add my thanks to the Minister for advance sight of this statement. It's good to have the government's next step to try and support fans and performers and others in working in the live events industry laid out in today's announcement. We know the huge value of live events in this country, great contribution to our economic as well as our cultural well-being, and it's right that the government is taking action on this issue. Too many fans across the country have fallen prey to sharp practices and touts ripping them off, and the Liberal Democrats are supportive of taking action. Now, we've long called for the implementation of the Competition and Market Authority's recommendations to crack down on ticket resale, and those recommendations should be leading the government forward on this issue. Measures such as capping ticket resales are important, but possibly the Minister can provide a bit greater clarity on the government's intentions in that regard. Can he suggest what cap on ticket resales the government would favour at the moment? And what new powers of enforcement they will give to trading standards and the CMA? But beyond those measures, will they consider being more ambitious, for example, giving consumers more control by requiring ticket companies to provide information, accurate information on price increases, or answer Liberal Democrat calls to review the use of transaction fees? Now, I want to be clear, we welcome the government looking at the queuing systems used by ticket sellers, both in the primary and resale markets, and considering measures that could address that current situation that he has described, that too often feels unfair and arbitrary to those fans on the end of it. Hearing the voices of fans in this discussion is undoubtedly important, so we really do welcome the consultation. But fans also want to know that the government will get on and act to solve these problems. So, to conclude, can I ask the Minister to inform the House as to when fans will actually start to see some changes implemented? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I welcome him to his post and welcome the Lib Dems' support for what we're proposing. Just a couple of things. He referred to accurate information. You could certainly argue that that is already legislated for, but not very well enforced. And indeed, when I was looking at some of these sites earlier on today, it's quite interesting that sometimes the face value is findable, but not at the same time as the price that you're going to pay. And you would have thought that it should be mandatory that you should be able to see both of those things at the same time if you're going to be ripped off. Though I personally don't subscribe to this line that if somebody's prepared to pay £2,417 for a Dua Lipa ticket, then so be it. I don't believe in that. That, it seems to me, is effectively the line from Eurythmics. Some of them want to be abused, and I don't think we should adopt that policy at all. Also, on transaction fees, the point he made, I think I'm right in saying that the Digital Markets Competition and Consumers Act 2024, section 230, would already apply to what he's arguing for. But if I've got that wrong, I will send him a note. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I note that I think at one point you said that your favourite song, it may have been at a particular event, was Girls Just Want to Have Fun by Cyndi Lauper. Now, I'm not sure, because she performed at the Royal Albert Hall last year. I'm not sure whether you were there.
I'd like to commend the Minister for his astonishing memory. Dr. Rupert Huck.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is hugely welcomed by me after the disappointment of my private member's bill on this falling off, and by my constituent Alison Martin, who's mum of Coldplay's Chris, and she fed into mine. So can my friend assure me that he will resist that sort of over-regulation of our lives, market forces argument we hear time after time from people opposite? We just heard it again. When I was trying to get sign-ups for my bill, a lot of Conservatives didn't want to know, because this is a consumer protection measure. It's a cap for all of our constituents to stop those bots hoovering up and hiking up the prices of these things. And also, can he reiterate that we're not against all dynamic pricing, because the price of tickets can go down as well as up, and we don't mind that.
Can I commend her for a private member's bill? I think I told her that we were going to be acting fairly soon, and so her private member's bill might not be necessary. She didn't believe me, and she ploughed on. But we are intent upon acting. She's quite right about dynamic pricing. I mean, I've been involved in a small arts festival in my own constituency in Treorchy, and we offer early bird tickets. That's a form of dynamic pricing, which I think works for everybody, and we certainly don't want to prohibit that. She's quite right. Much as I like my opposite number, the Minister, I find it quite easy to resist him. I just keep on thinking of those lines from Pink when I think of the previous government. What about all those plans that ended in disaster?
Chair of the Select Committee, Dame Caroline Dinage.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I welcome this. I welcome the government putting music fans at the forefront of these consultations, although the Minister will know that I would like him to go further and have a full fan-led review of music. But meanwhile, looking at the details of these consultations, it's telling to me that while Ticketmaster welcomed the resale consultations, they're quite silent on the dynamic pricing issue. And Oasis, he'll recall, told their fans that dynamic pricing was a tool to combat ticket touting. So does the Minister agree that if the government acts decisively to stop this large-scale touting, inflating ticket prices, there will be less need for promoters like Live Nation to have to use dynamic pricing?
Well, she makes a very good point, and it's a delight to be able to agree with her on something in this area at the moment, because I think we might yet have a little bit of a disagreement over copyright and artificial intelligence, but I think that's only because she's misunderstood what we're trying to do. I hope to be able to sit down with her and talk it all through. No, she makes a very good point. Look, that's why we want to make sure that we get the legislation right, and that's why we're doing a consultation rather than just storming ahead with a piece of legislation. And as my honourable friend from Washington said earlier, there's no point in doing any of these measures unless you're going to have a proper system of enforcement either.
Clive Efford.
Deputy Speaker, I'd just like to pay tribute to my honourable friend from Washington and Gateshead South for the doughty way that she has fought this corner for many, many years. I remember when I was Shadow Sports Minister, and this was my area, that even back then she was campaigning hard on this. I mean, this is very much legislation in favour of the fans. I mean, we have to remember that in many cases, the artists themselves realise that their own fans are being priced out of being able to go to their concerts by the practices of these online ticket touts. And so if we want to get true fans, you know, and make the tickets affordable so that these people can attend and see their favourite bands and artists, then this legislation is well overdue. And I just urge my honourable friend to move ahead swiftly and bring in this long overdue legislation.
I'm very grateful, and I commend him too, because I know this is something that he's been working on for quite a long time. And when he was Shadow Sports Minister, it was one of the things that he was keen for us to progress. I should say I'm joined by my honourable member, the Sports Minister. And of course, one of the ironies is that in some sports, we already implement something remarkably similar, if not tougher. So it's perfectly legitimate, I think, for us to be moving in a direction that puts these things on an equal footing. I take the point he makes about speed, and I recognise that I didn't respond to the honourable member who spoke for the Lib Dems when he asked when are we going to get action. I very much hope that if we get a very clear answer from the consultation, we'll be able to come forward with plans as a matter of urgency, and there must be a King's speech coming along sometime soon.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Continuing the Cyndi Lauper theme, I'm sure the Minister would agree that we've got to see these touts in their true colours. And the fact is that they will try to find ways round these eminently praiseworthy proposals. So let's imagine that he gets his cap in. What is to stop a undercover operation going ahead with a large number of individuals trying to make a small number of sales each on a website like eBay? How would he be able to enforce the cap in a situation like that?
Well, it's not just about the cap. We're consulting on several elements. So one of the other elements is about how many tickets an individual seller should be able to purchase. Now you could argue, the Shadow Minister could have argued that some of this is already met by the legislation, but I would argue that it's not clear enough, and that's one of the things that we do need to tackle. And in fact, if you look at all the different bits of legislation that we've accumulated over the years, many of them, every time there's a bill that my honourable friend from Washington has been able to table an amendment to, with support from some magnificent people in the House of Lords, it has been possible to get things through. That's why we may need to do quite a bit of rationalisation of the legislation in this field. But he makes a good point about we will always have to keep ahead of the game.
Emma Foodie.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm delighted by the statement that the Minister has given today. This consultation will be welcomed by the entire cooperative movement who've been campaigning to keep fans at the heart of music. Access to culture is such an important part of our country, and our movement stands for the party of the consumer. Does the Minister agree that the actions like the one in taking this consultation forward is the best way to extend access to culture for real fans?
Yes, I do. And there's another point where we want to make real progress, incidentally, which is that you've got to have, not only have you got to have massive gigs, which everybody loves going to, and where you can celebrate along with thousands and thousands. You also want very intimate ones, and one of the most special moments is when you've seen a band perform first in a tiny venue of just 100 or 150 people, and then you see them in a massive venue or performing at Glastonbury or whatever it might be. So we need to look at the whole of the music system in the UK. That means a creative education for every single child. Wouldn't it be good if every child had an opportunity to go to live music at least once a year, as well as an opportunity to learn a musical instrument or learn how to sing? These are all the parts of a whole music approach that I think we need in this country.
Pete Wishart.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I warmly congratulate the Government for bringing forward these measures, which I wholeheartedly support, and I'm very surprised at the front bench, the Conservatives, who I think have got caught up in some garbled, ill-informed nonsense, but I really hope in time they come on board with these proposals, because they are important, because music, for too long, music fans have been ripped off and abused by the touts and the scalpers who have been nothing other than parasites on our live music sector. So I wholeheartedly welcome these proposals, and I pay tributes to the Honourable Member for Washington and Gate South, and also the Fanfare Alliance, who've been campaigning on this for such a long time, and campaigning newspapers like the Daily Record, who regularly feature large articles on this issue. But where we have this in place now, I'd like to hear more about the proposals for the dynamic pricing. This has been the issue I think has perplexed music fans more than anything over the summer. We now have some sort of route way towards resolving ticket touting. I think we need to hear more about what he's going to do exactly about dynamic pricing, because that's something that needs fixed.
Well, it's always a delight to be able to please the honourable gentleman, because this is not an event that happens from this side of the House very often, I think he would confess. And I'm not sure any tickets are available for his music gigs, or whether they're selling at multiple prices. He has been a doughty campaigner for the creative industries over the years, and I welcome that. Look, we were very clear in the general election what we were going to do in relation to the primary issue here. We hadn't made any commitments around dynamic pricing, and that's why we're offering a much more tentative approach in relation to that, and because we know that there are forms of dynamic pricing that work extremely well. You know, when you go and buy a last-minute theatre ticket, that is a form of dynamic pricing, because you want to get the theatre full at the end of the day. So we want to tread a bit more carefully there. That's why it's a call for evidence rather than us presenting our proposals at this stage. If he's got good ideas on what we should do, then my door is open. Do come and talk to us.
Annalise Midgley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I am made up at this statement made today, especially as someone with a music industry background and also as a big fan. Dynamic pricing made headlines last summer with Oasis when their fans were hit by prices that were 2, 3 or even 4 times the face value after they queued for hours and hours, and they got to pay and had a matter of minutes to decide whether they wanted those tickets. John Robb, the music writer, said, "Dynamic pricing exploits people's excitement in the worst possible way." And this was after Ticketmaster behaved no better than the touts that they claim to protect fans from. So I welcome this call for evidence into this practice. But can the Minister assure me that this leads to real action so that fans are no longer ripped off by surge pricing?
I think just about the first thing my honourable friend said to me when she collared me in a lobby after we'd won the general election is, "You are going to do something about ticket touts, aren't you?" So I'm glad I'm able to please her this afternoon. Look, I mean, one of the worst things that can happen, and I'm sure every member of Oasis would say this, if you've gone through the process of buying tickets, you don't want everybody then to be saying, you don't look back in anger. Sorry, I had to work really hard to fit that in, didn't I? But it's a true point. You want the process of buying a ticket to be fair, open, transparent, and for the person buying the ticket to feel that they've got a sane and sensible deal rather than that they've been ripped off. And the problem with the present situation is that all too often people feel that they've just been ripped off, and that undermines the whole joy and passion of the event.
Iqbal Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Every time the government proposes something in the interests of the consumer and the public, I'm so excited, and I welcome the statement from the Minister. Does he agree with me that as well as dynamic ticket pricing, where the price of the ticket itself fluctuates in always the wrong direction, there are high and disproportionate service fees, which have also now can become higher during peak times? Does he agree that there is a clear need for transparent pricing for consumers where they see a breakdown before they press buy?
100% I agree with him about this fees issue. There's an argument that you could say that it's already met by Section 230 of the bill that we passed last year, or the Act that we passed last year. But that's why we are consulting on that specific issue. And I would just say to the ticket touts who've complained about this, in the words of the musical Chicago, they had it coming. They only had themselves to blame.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for a very positive statement. There's nobody in the Chamber, I believe, would be all but encouraged by what has happened. The Minister is surely familiar with the Oasis lyrics. I promise not to sing them. And it goes along this line. And so Sally can wait. She knows it's too late as she's walking on by. Unfortunately for many fans, waiting wasn't an option, and they were left with the painful reality that dynamic pricing made their wallets melt away. Given reports that fans were subjected to inflated prices through in-demand dynamic pricing, with tickets jumping from less than 150 up to some 350 in moments, how will the Minister ensure that ticket sellers and event organisers in particular comply with the proposed consumer protection laws, especially those requiring transparency in pricing? Thank you so much.
Well, look, I mean, I'm grateful for his comments and for his musical rendition, which he didn't put into song. And I'm grateful for that probably as well. I don't know, maybe he has a beautiful high tenor voice, I don't know. But one of my anxieties about this whole situation is that one of the reasons that there haven't been very many prosecutions may be because the law has been too complicated, but it may also be because trading standards have really struggled in recent years because they are subject to budget cuts through local authorities. That's why, this for me is part of the whole of what government is trying to do, to try to put our public services back on a much more solid and secure footing and bring in legislation that stands up for consumers. But I'm grateful, and if he's got any particular ideas on how we could specifically ensure that there is proper enforcement, not least in Northern Ireland, then I'd be really grateful to hear them.
That concludes the statement, and we now come on to the Select Committee statement on behalf of the Defence Committee. Mrs Emma Llewellyn-Buck will speak for up to 10 minutes, during which no interventions may be taken. At the conclusion of her statement, I will call members to ask questions on the subject of the statement. These should be brief questions and not full speeches. I emphasise that questions should be directed to the Select Committee member, not the relevant government minister, and front benchers may take part in questioning. I call Mrs Emma Llewellyn-Buck.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And now for an entirely different note, it is a pleasure to present this report today on behalf of the Defence Committee. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's important at the outset to say that our report is not focused on the ethical questions that using artificial intelligence in defence raises. That is because the noble lords in the other place completed a very in-depth committee report into AI in weapons systems prior to our inquiry. In that report, they rightly addressed issues of safety, compliance with international law, and the need for a human in the loop. It is also important to say that the key defence documents we refer to throughout our report were produced under the previous government. However, we have not received an indication from the current government that they will be making any significant major departures from these documents. Our focus was on trying to understand what the Ministry of Defence is doing in this area and how they can develop a successful defence AI sector in the UK. Since 2018, AI has been appearing increasingly in defence documents, as well as being spoken about by ministers and senior military figures. The Defence Artificial Intelligence and Autonomy Unit and the Defence AI Centre have since come into being, and the Defence Artificial Intelligence Strategy was published in 2022. Our strong research pedigree in computer science and availability of computing power could put the UK at a strong advantage. And Pillar 2 of our AUKUS partnership continues to present opportunities for working with our allies and interoperability. Overall, though, we found that despite this, there is a say-do gap where the department is identifying the right priorities, but they have been unable to say what steps they will take to achieve them. Rhetoric does not match reality. This leaves us behind our allies and disadvantaged when it comes to our adversaries. Similarly, the department's aim to be AI ready is something we considered problematic. Technology is evolving at such a rapid pace, and the MOD will never be sufficiently AI ready. Instead, it should be aiming to be AI native, whereby AI is no longer viewed as a niche add-on, but a core component running right through defence. This will take leadership, cultural and practical changes. AI is a general purpose technology, and although we don't have a clear idea of the size of our defence AI sector, what we do know is that it is young and underdeveloped, and that many of the companies who supply defence in the future are likely to cut across the civilian and the military sector. For the MOD to give these less traditional companies and investors any confidence and incentivise them to do business with the MOD, they need to be clear on what it is they want. They need to show more flexibility, be less prescriptive in requirements, address delays in security clearances, and fully embrace the recommendation from the Haythornthwaite Review, where the brightest minds can zigzag between the military and the commercial civilian sector. The MOD, when it comes to new capabilities, is not comfortable with rapid change, risk or experimentation. Yet this is exactly how our tech companies and startups operate. The MOD's existing approach of contracting with primes, spending 10 to 15 years building a ship, tank or aircraft to exquisite specifications, just does not cut it in an increasingly data and software-driven environment. Whilst the GCAP programme is designed with an open system architecture where software capabilities can be plugged in and out of the hardware, and the new spiral model of overall defence procurement in the integrated procurement model are welcome, our committee found no evidence of fundamental changes across the organisation. For these smaller, innovative companies to engage with the MOD must be a better customer. Key to developing our defence AI ecosystem is the digital infrastructure, yet the department's plan for a digital backbone is behind schedule in data collection, labelling and sharing, which are all key to training defence AI models, must be improved. Clarity of leadership and responsibility is also needed. The DAIC is headed by a one-star officer, and we remain unclear where the centre is actually based. There's fragmentation across the MOD, where the frontline commands of each service all have individual responsibility for AI development. This causes confusion and duplication. Madam Deputy Speaker, Ukraine has shown us that AI is changing the battlefield. AI has the potential to transform UK defence from the back office to the front line. In such a rapidly developing environment, we can't predict what will come next, but what we do know for certain is that our allies and our adversaries are using and developing AI for military advantage. We remain hopeful that the Strategic Defence Review, the government's focus today on AI, and by adopting our recommendations, that the department will start to turn their rhetoric into a reality, so that they are doing more than they are saying. Before I finish, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to acknowledge what a team effort producing this report has been. I want to thank the previous committee, many of whom, despite our political differences, I became firm friends with and dearly miss. I also want to thank the new committee, who have worked very hard to finalise this report. I also want to thank everyone who has engaged with us, including the MOD and the previous Minister, who's in his place on the shadow front bench, our excellent committee staff, especially George James, who managed the inquiry, and Professor Kenneth Payne, our very knowledgeable expert advisor to the inquiry. I look forward, Madam Deputy Speaker, to taking any questions from right honourable and honourable members, and I sincerely hope they like the answers that they get.
Madam Minister James Cartledge. can I say, an excellent report, and I'm very grateful for her comments, recognising obviously my role there, the integrated procurement model, and a lot of the work we did in government. But she's right, this is an area of technology that's changing at extraordinary speed. It's having real impact on the live battlefront in Ukraine. Just two specific points, if I may. First of all, she said that it was the House of Lords Committee that looked at the ethical issues. I would urge the committee not to ignore those, because my view is we need to retain maximum freedom of operation and not be bound by, for example, new definitions of autonomy that may limit our military capabilities. But specifically on the very good point about SMEs that may be in the civil area not involved in defence, we all agree we want to get them more involved in the defence side. But can I ask her to look at the issue of how we share information, particularly at secret, with SMEs as well as the primes, because this was something we were making progress on when I was at the department, and perhaps with the committee's help we can look at those case studies where civil companies have come in and made it successful getting the defence sector by having that strong link in right into the centre of the MOD.
Emma Llewellyn. Thank the right honourable member for that question. I couldn't agree with him more. There is a section in our report that addresses quite in detail SMEs, their engagement with the department, and the work that the right honourable member did when he was in government is something that I think we should be carrying forward, especially in the integrated procurement model.
Tan Singh Desai, Chair of the Select Committee.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to place on record my gratitude to my honourable friend, the Member for South Shields, for chairing the subcommittee, members of the previous committee, and indeed the Defence Committee staff for all of their hard work on our report on artificial intelligence, a matter so integral to our nation's defence. While I welcome the Prime Minister's announcement today on embracing AI within government, does my honourable friend agree that there seems to be a chasm between the Ministry of Defence's rhetoric versus the reality, where in practice it's still treated as a novelty rather than as a fundamental part of the Defence's toolkit?
Emma Llewellyn.
I thank my honourable friend, the chair of our committee, for his question and all of his work in getting our report to publication. And he is right to highlight this gap between what the MOD wants to do and how they plan to achieve it ran through our entire report, and it is something that the MOD needs to get a handle on. And I'm sure you'll agree with me that by implementing our recommendations, the department can move to a position where AI is threaded through the organisation as a whole, as opposed to being a niche add-on and some novelty that defence does.
Yeah. Sir Julian Lewis.
Military history books are full of examples of the difficulty that defence scientists had in selling their revolutionary ideas to military chiefs and civil servants. Given the nebulous nature of artificial intelligence, was the subcommittee satisfied that there is a specialist cadre within the Ministry of Defence that is intellectually equipped to make appropriate assessments of schemes that are put forward for new weapons systems?
Yeah. Emma Llewellyn.
Thank the right honourable member for that question. One of the difficulties that we found was that not all of the information that the committee wanted was readily available to us. We don't still yet have a clear picture of exactly what is happening in the MOD when it comes to artificial intelligence. What we are recommending is that there is more clarity, that the department is more clear about the skill sets that it needs and about the gaps that are there, so that we can then look to implement those recommendations from the Hawthorne-Waite review, where we have those who do have the knowledge and do have the expertise can zigzag in and out of the department.
We now come to the...
Madam Deputy Speaker, apologies for being a little on the late side on that one. Can I commend the work of the Defence Select Committee? I think the report that we've heard today is so important, given where particularly some of the news that we've seen coming from Ukraine in the last few years and the way that that conflict has developed. I think one of the things for me that's come out so clearly is the need to be on the cutting edge of all this. Now, the UN this year declared 2025 to be the International Year of Quantum. Does she think that actually the developments that she's talking about in this statement lend additional credence to the importance of that statement and of bringing those cutting edge developments to our defence capabilities?
Emma Llewellyn. Thank the Honourable Member for that question, and I couldn't agree with him more. And what today's announcement from the government has shown is that the government is taking AI and its potential very seriously. And our committee report shows that there are steps they can take when it comes to defence to make sure that the department is more AI native and has defence running through it.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the development of defence technology throughout the decades has been bound by international law, at least since 1945. I understand that the Defence Committee has taken the view that it won't be informed by law or ethics, but I wonder whether there will be some work done in the future to bring together the House of Lords report in 2023 and the work that this Defence Committee has done so expertly this time.
Emma Llewellyn. Thank the Honourable Member for that question, and he is indeed right to raise this. We very much took note of our Noble Lord's report. It is also referenced in our final inquiry report. And we do urge progress, but we urge progress in AI and defence on the understanding that it will be always done in line with a strong ethical and accountable framework and with a human in the loop.
Helen Maguire.
Thank you so much for the report, and it was helpful to understand about the Lord's report. And I wondered if the government could outline the timetable for, or if you knew when that ethical and moral report would be considered and incorporated into government policy. And also further to that, I wondered if the Honourable Member could outline how effectively the MOD would be working with international companies, because obviously it's an incredibly complex area, to make sure that the maximum, the risk of security risk is massively reduced.
Emma Llewellyn.
Thank the Honourable Member for that question. The Honourable Member is, of course, asking me for things that are outside the scope of our report and also asking questions of government. I am here, Madam Deputy Speaker, today speaking on behalf of our committee. It's way above my pay grade to start answering for our government. Go on. But the Honourable Member does raise an important point with regards to the Lord's report. I believe the previous government already responded to the report in the Lords. But as with everything we do in defence, Madam Deputy Speaker, we will do it in line with our allies, we will do it in line with NATO, and we will continue to work with our allies on GCAP and the AUKUS partnership to make sure that everything we do together, not in isolation.
Derek Twigg.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I congratulate my honourable friend on what is truly an excellent report, and the leadership that she showed throughout in terms of dealing with the witnesses and the evidence that came forward, but actually compiling the report together. And obviously, as she rightly said, she was helped very, very closely and very strongly with some excellent people from our staff on the Defence Committee. And I've got to say, the Defence Committee I served on in the last Parliament was probably the best committee that I'd been a member of in terms of the commitment and the knowledge of individual, of which my honourable friend was one of those, that had of defence issues and which we were able to put to good use. And I think she also referred to the fact that despite differences of parties, actually on that committee we were very united in taking issues forward and holding ministers to account, which I'm sure the new committee will do exactly the same. And it's really great that the new chair is here today to support it and ensure that we got this report out in a timely and good manner. Now, my honourable friend will know probably, I think, the issues I'm going to raise. One is in terms of the fact that AI and what's happening in the defence field is moving so rapidly at the moment and changes almost by the week or month. And would she agree that it really is important that the MOD and those involved in defence harness that change quickly and keep on top of that and ensure that we are leading the field in the area of AI and not following all the time? I think that's really important. The other point I recall we had a discussion on during the session was the importance of SMEs and small firms, startups, and harnessing their talent and potential and making sure that we use that in the UK for the benefit of our armed forces and developing the best possible defence for our country. I'd be very grateful for my honourable friend if she was able to answer some of those questions.
Emma Llewellyn.
I thank my right honourable friend for those comments and for all his help on the committee. It is an absolute joy to be once again serving on the Defence Committee with my right honourable friend. He is correct that EI is moving rapidly and the MOD do need to harness it quickly because our adversaries are. We know from some open source data in other areas that it is something that we cannot allow to be behind the curve on. And when it comes to SMEs, they have a particular mindset, my honourable friend will know, where they are happy to have that feel first an experimental mindset that often the MOD is not used to, which is why in our report we again highlight that significant cultural change and leadership is needed in the MOD to get it to a position where those SMEs can work better with it for the benefit of our entire Defence AI ecosystem.
That concludes the statement, and we now come to the presentation of Bill. Presentation of Bill Ben Maguire.
Rural Crime Strategy Bill.
Second reading, what day?
Friday the 4th of July.
Friday the 4th of July. We now come to the business of the day. Debate on hospice and palliative care. Paul Kohler to move.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would first like to thank the Backbench Business Committee for granting time for this important debate and colleagues from across the House for supporting my application and joining me today to discuss a subject which, to use an old cliché but in no more apposite a context, is truly a matter of life and death. When this House debated the Terminally Ill Adults End-of-Life Bill last November, the crisis in hospice funding and concerns over the provision of palliative care was a constant refrain, forming the subtext of many of the speeches from both supporters and opponents of the bill. As someone who entered the chamber that morning undecided as to how I would vote, I became increasingly convinced throughout the 5 hours of powerful argument and testimony that no matter what the House decided, the time had come to address the issue of hospice funding and the provision of palliative care head-on. For death is as much a part of life as living. Whilst as parliamentarians we readily focus on what makes a good life, we rarely consider what makes a good death. It's absolutely possible to have a good death, as I saw with my mother, who passed away in comfort at the beautiful Arthur Rank Hospice in Cambridge, and my father, who died in the exceptional palliative care facility at Bellevue Hospital in New York. As a family, we remember those times as sad but cathartic, with moments of laughter as well as tears, as when my father, somewhat confused toward the end of life, but with a glint still in his eye, asked as I sat next to him, stroking his forehead, whether I was a lady friend. Sadly, however, too many in our society do not experience a good death, and we need to start asking why. The Honourable Member of Spen Valley bravely took on that challenge in her private member's bill, and I hope this debate will afford us an opportunity to build on those foundations, of course.
And does he agree with me that the renewed focus on the hospice and palliative care sectors is extremely welcome and indeed overdue, and that the extra £100 million of investment shows how seriously this government is taking this issue, ensuring that people approaching the end of life are fully supportive in whatever choices they choose to make at the end of life?
Thank you. I do agree. I do indeed agree with it, with Honourable Lane, and I will be coming to those points further, but yes, I do agree. Today is consequently not about rehashing the arguments made that Friday, but to allow honourable members time to discuss and reflect on this separate but inextricably linked subject. Not the last word on hospice and palliative care, but an important step in forging a consensus that I hope will unite us, no matter where we ultimately stand on assisted dying. I began by referencing the crisis in hospice funding. Before I proceed further, I want to echo what the member of Spen Valley just said and thank the Health Secretary for the £100 million in capital and digital monies he announced last month. It will make a profound difference to the sector's current financial position I've been asked both by individual hospices and Hospice UK to convey their genuine gratitude. In a similar vein, the government's recently announced commitment to extend the Children's Hospice Grant by a further year is deeply appreciated and equally vital to maintaining levels of service in this heart-rending and profoundly important part of the hospice movement. However, these are only short-term fixes and to fail to provide the long-term funding and certainty critical to securing the future of the hospice movement. Currently, only 1/3 of hospice funding is provided by the government, with the rest coming from charitable sources, leaving hospices vulnerable to increased cost pressures, as can be seen from a recent Hospice UK survey which found at least 20% of hospices have either cut services in the last year or are planning to do so. Becca Trower, the clinical director of the wonderful St Raphael's Hospice, which provides excellent care to residents in my Wimbledon constituency, was unambiguous when she told me, "We have a funding crisis and we need to protect our hospice." Last year, that meant St Raphael's was forced to strip £1 million from its £6.5 million budget by ending its hospice at home service, which provided vital care, advice and support to patients and carers in their own home. A virtual ward, in fact, but not one that fitted within the NHS definition of such, so as to track the separate ICB funding available for such initiatives. In just 1 month, the cuts to this service directly impacted 26 patients, many of whom spent their last days taking up valuable hospital beds, dying in the one place they did not want to die, and putting further pressure on the NHS. It makes no sense at a time when the government is aiming to move medicine into the community for hospices to be forced into a position that achieves the opposite. A contradiction mirrored in the current funding settlement, where the government has given with one hand, taken with the other by increasing employers' national insurance contributions. The refusal to exempt charities will exacerbate the challenges confronting hospices, with the amazing Shooting Star Children's Hospice, for example, which provides wonderful support for families in my constituency, estimating this will add another £200,000 to next year's cost basis. Hospices need certainty. Doubts over funding undermine morale and saps energy, making both recruitment and retention of staff another huge issue for the sector. To address these problems, the government needs to introduce a consistent, reliable funding mechanism which reflects the rising costs of care. Hospices consequently need to be included within NHS's much anticipated 10-year health plan, while, in parallel with this, their staffing needs must be addressed in the next NHS long-term workforce plan. It should not be forgotten, hospices provide a variety of services in addition to palliative care, including emotional, psychological and spiritual support, physio and occupational therapy, practical support, complementary therapies, respite care and bereavement services. Much of this is beyond the clinical and not something the NHS can be expected nor can afford to provide. That is why no one I spoke to in the hospice movement thought hospices should be subsumed within the NHS. They provide a complementary service which extends well beyond the clinical and to which a charitable funding model is both more effective and appropriate. Of course.
Can I commend them for for setting the scene so very well? One of the concerns that I have and others in the Chamber will have is the impact upon the workers in hospice. It's about not just about the financial implications, which is all part of the overall issue, but it's the issue of burnout. Staff are working long hours. They're doing that because they're volunteers in many cases, but they're doing that because that's what they're committed to. And does he share my concern that those who are doing that, that the burnout in hospice care will have an impact on the NHS in the long term?
Thank you for that intervention. I do indeed agree with the Honourable Member. We need more palliative care specialists, we need more training, and yes, there's a real danger of burnout at the moment. Where I got to, I forget, but I think I finished that page. It is not just hospices which provide palliative care, of course, and in talking to specialists both within and beyond the hospice sector, I've been struck by their commitment to giving patients a good death and their frustration that so many do not receive one. As a palliative care doctor recently told The Guardian, I sometimes see patients who come into hospital in unspeakable agony and want their lives to end. It is not because their pain cannot be prevented, but because they are not getting the care they need. While a local oncologist told me, demand for services is simply outstripping supply. The majority of patients are not getting their end-of-life care wishes met. The specialist palliative care teams are very good. There are not enough of them, and they do not have adequate resources. Huge regional inequalities also exist in the provision and quality of services due to the vagaries of the current funding model. The Health and Care Act 2022 included for the first time a statutory duty for ICBs to provide palliative care. However, it did not include a minimum standard of core provision, leaving it to what each ICB considers appropriate. Freedom of information requests submitted by Hospice UK in 2023 found that adult hospice funding consequently ranged from just 23p to £10.33 per head of population across different ICBs. For children's hospices, the variations were even starker. Research from the amazing charity Together for Short Lives found spending per child with a life-limiting condition varying from an average of £531 in Norfolk and Waveney to just £28 in South Yorkshire.
On that note, will the gentleman give way?
Of course.
I thank you for giving way. On that point about the postcode lottery, and I know it's a very oft-used cliche by politicians, as I've heard speaking to Hospice UK, a single gift from a legacy covers the running costs for a hospice in the UK for, I think, for 5 years, and has done on one occasion. Does the honourable member agree that this example is one of the starkest extreme illustrations of how the current system is so unbalanced and leaves people living from street to street with such disparities of access to such an important element of healthcare?
Thank you for that intervention. I do indeed agree, and we'll be coming to some solutions that might address this issue, because we must increase the core responsibilities of ICBs in this area. Inevitably, much palliative care is provided not by specialists, but generalists, such as GPs, trainee doctors and community nurses, whom care of the dying is not their primary focus, many lacking the training, time and resources needed to provide what is possible. Not through their fault, but due to a system that does not regard palliative care as a core function. This is something all too evident at the outset of their careers, with one medical student telling me, I only received 2 mandatory days training on palliative care in my entire degree. This is simply not enough, and we need to increase training across the board to ensure patients are given equal access to high-quality care. Since the Shipman case, there is also unacceptable legal uncertainty, particularly amongst non-palliative care specialists, as to the extent to which analgesics can be given in sufficient quantity to alleviate pain, even where that might hasten death. The system requires complete overhaul. We need more palliative care specialists and better training for non-specialists, including robust advice on the legality of giving sufficient pain relief to alleviate suffering, buttressed, if deemed necessary and appropriate, by more explicit guidance in the DPP's Code for Crown Prosecutors and the Lord Chief Justice Criminal Practice Directions. Whilst ICBs should be required to provide a minimum level of palliative care as a core function. This would have a transformative effect on how palliative care is funded, both within and beyond the hospice sector, rather than leaving it to the generosity of particular ICBs, such as South West London and Surrey Heartlands, both of which do all they can to fund local hospices, but within the constraints of a funding model that necessarily limits their abilities to do so. In concluding, I want to return to where I began. The debate is a matter of life and death. Ensuring a good death is not just important for the individual and at the end of their life, but for those they leave behind. Knowing someone passed away peacefully can bring real comfort to those mourning their loss. If I may, Madam Speaker, I would like to end with the words of Fleur, whose son received end-of-life care at the wonderful Shooting Star Hospice. Hospices are not just places where life comes to a close, she said. They are places where those left behind learn how to keep on living. When my son Toby died, our hospice didn't just care for him, it cared for all of us, to give us a future not defined by trauma, but by love, resilience and hope. Months later, when my daughter had to step back into a hospital, the place where we had first been told we would lose Toby, she froze, overwhelmed by fear and grief. When she returned to the hospice, the very place where Toby had taken his last breath, she ran inside, kicked off her shoes and threw herself into the arms of a nurse. That is what it's possible to achieve. I hope the government is listening. Thank you.
The question is, as on the order paper, I call Harpreet Uppal.
Thank you, Deputy Madam Speaker, and it's an absolute honour to follow the Honourable Member for Wimbledon, and what a wonderfully poignant speech. And thank you for bringing this debate forward. As the Member of Parliament for Huddersfield, I've had the privilege of witnessing firsthand the exceptional work of hospices such as Forget Me Not, Children's Hospice and the Kirkwood. These organisations are lifelines for individuals and families facing life-limiting conditions. I welcome the recent announcement of the expansion of hospice funding, which is a crucial step in addressing the financial challenges these vital organisations face. Hospices like Forget Me Not and the Kirkwood don't just offer medical care. They provide emotional, psychological and practical support to patients and their families. They ensure dignity and compassion at every step of the journey, addressing the full spectrum of needs for those they care for. Steve, a local dad whose son, 10-year-old Ethan, received support from the Forget Me Not Hospice, spoke of its life-changing work for Ethan, but also for the whole family. Steve said, when he's here, he's comfortable. It's a lovely environment, it's not clinical, and he's treated like a normal person. They are not just care providers, but community builders, offering spaces of comfort and support during life's most difficult times. Huddersfield University is also leading on joint work with local hospices in Huddersfield on research and clinical practice on end-of-life care. This includes the university working with the Kirkwood Hospice to create a postgraduate certificate in the end-of-life care, the first of its kind in the UK to link with a hospice. And whilst I'm sat next to the Honourable Member for Spen Valley, I have to pay tribute to her for the way she has conducted the debate on her bill, the Terminally Ill Adults End-of-Life Bill. There's no doubt that she has moved the debate on funding for hospice care. Thank you very much. The expansion of hospice funding is significant and a welcome development, but we must also acknowledge that many hospices, including those in my constituency, still face immense financial pressures. Forget Me Not Children's Hospice has recently launched an urgent appeal to address a £1 million funding gap. This expansion of funding must be also part of a larger ongoing strategy to ensure long-term commission funding for hospices is part of the 10-year NHS plan. I will.
Thank my honourable friend for giving way. St Leonard's Hospice in my constituency of York Outer lovingly cared for my uncle last year in his final weeks with extraordinary compassion. I hear her calls for hospices in her constituency. Will she agree with me that because of the empathy that they have and the important work that they do, we must all campaign for the funding that our hospices desperately need?
I absolutely do, and can I pass on my condolences to you and your family, and also pay tribute to the local hospice and the work that they have done to support your family. I also want to raise the 26 million NHS England funding for children's hospices, formerly the Children's Hospice Grant. Traditionally, this funding was distributed centrally by NHS England, but as has previously been mentioned, it has been disseminated by integrated care boards, but it has caused delays to many children's hospices accessing their funding, including Forget Me Not. It is critical that this funding is ring-fenced for children's hospices, and I hope the Minister will review if it can again be centrally distributed to avoid further delays. The new funding for hospices is an important milestone, and can I welcome the government's approach to this and thank the Minister for the work he has done. I know the hospice sectors very much welcomes this additional funding, but can it also mark the beginning of further government support for these essential services? Hospices are an integral, I can't say it. Apologies, integral is getting a bit late for me now on this Monday evening, of our healthcare system, and we must ensure they have the resources and support they need to continue their vital work, including the specialist doctors and nurses that are needed amongst many hospices. Madam Deputy Speaker, together through government action, community support and the tireless effort of hospice staff and volunteers, we can ensure that hospices not only survive but thrive, continuing to provide the compassion and dignity that every individual deserves. Thank you.
I call Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First, I must congratulate the Honourable Member from Wimbledon for securing this debate. I can tell him, as a member of the Backbench Business Committee, I can tell him he was a very convincing argument and to secure the debate. Like others, I suspect, during the course of the evening, one of my aims is to praise my local hospices, Lindsay Lodge in Scunthorpe and St Andrews in Grimsby, both of which provide care to my constituents. I have a particular affection for St Andrews because my father passed away in their care, and my mother actually died on the day she was supposed to be moving into St Andrews. So as I say, I've got a particular affection for them. That is over 30 years ago, and I've seen how they developed over the years since, and they continue to provide absolutely superb care. And of course the demand is increasing. Demographics have changed, people are living longer, and of course they do actually ease the burden on the NHS. St Andrews has a staff of 133 permanent staff, but over 400 volunteers. As it happens, I visited St Andrews last Friday, a meeting that was scheduled some weeks ago, but so it's very convenient for this, and I do have a specific question for the Minister relating to St Andrews, which I will come to later. Voluntary donations in areas such as North East Lincolnshire are crucial, as they are elsewhere. But of course, with relatively low incomes and property values very low, when people leave a legacy of a share of their property perhaps, that doesn't realise the same sort of return as it would do in many parts of the country. St Andrews, I could give a whole list of what they provide, but one or two significant statistics are that they have over 3,000 adult inpatient bed nights and 694 children's hospice home sessions. They provide physiotherapy, creative therapy, they have social work contacts. They provide spiritual care for those of their patients and their families. The cost of operating all parts of the charity in 2024-25 is over £18,000 per day, and only 4 years ago it was £14,000 a day, a significant rise, as you will appreciate, 80% of which has to be earned or raised by the hospice, and in times of economic challenge it's increasingly difficult. The statutory income for the year 24-25 is expected to be only 21.5% of their total income. And currently, for every pound of statutory income, St Andrews has to raise £4.60, adding a very considerable financial challenge for the hospice, the volunteers and the fundraisers. And as we know, healthcare inflation does indeed run ahead of general inflation, and they have, of course, to try to keep pace with statutory salary increases to do with the national minimum wage. But of course, as with social enterprises which provide social care in North East Lincolnshire, the staff do not automatically get the increases that go to NHS workers, and inevitably the gap is widening. I did actually raise this at Health Questions with the Secretary of State last week, and I think it's going to be a growing problem as NHS wage increases again later this year. The gap between those providing care in the hospice and in the social care and the social enterprise businesses widens, and it will be about 10% by the time the next increase comes. And that, needless to say, is causing difficulties for those employees. So my specific question for the Minister, and I will write to him in the next day or two, because I don't expect that he's got all the details of St Andrews in his pack there, is that because of historical reasons, St Andrews only gets 21% of its income through statutory contributions, which I understand is about 12% below the national average. And this has come about by a whole series of historical adjustments that have taken place. And my plea to the Minister is that St Andrews is brought up to the national average as soon as possible. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Colette Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the member for Wimbledon for securing this important debate? As a nurse for 25 years and co-chair of the Hospice APPG, hospice and palliative care have always been at the heart of my work, both in this chamber and in my community. I would like to start by acknowledging the fantastic decision by the government to boost investment in hospices by £100 million, the largest funding uplift in a generation. This is a clear sign that the government is listening to the hospice sector and that they are responding with actions, not just words. But this uplift must be the beginning and not the end. This new money won't last forever. We must take concrete steps now to ensure the awful conditions of the hospice sector, which we inherited, are never repeated. It is also worth noting that the member for York Central recent Independent Commission on Palliative Care and End-of-Life Care, while welcome, is mainly about delivery, not funding. We simply cannot wait for a palliative care task force to complete their report, which could take months of time, which this sector cannot spare. In my role, I hear time and time again about postcode lotteries and the chronic lack of funding plaguing this vital sector. For example, John Taylor Hospice in my constituency does fantastic work, and through no fault of their own, they are facing a crisis in funding and have announced redundancies and the reduction in inpatient beds due to the funding shortfall. This story is repeated all over the country. I'm sure many members in this chamber they have a similar situation that they could share. Hospice care still relies heavily on charity. Bake sales and donations funded much of the work that supports families during some of their most vulnerable moments. This must change. This postcode lottery is not just unfair, it undermines the principles of universal health care. We cannot allow end-of-life care to depend on where you live and how much money you have. Hospices across the UK provide care and support to 300,000 people every year. They are an absolute essential part of our healthcare system, although they're in the charity sector. Every single day, hospices face rising costs of energy, food and medicine. Every single day, they deliver exceptional care, even as pressures mount. And every single day, they battle deficits that threaten their ability to continue. Despite all of these challenges, hospices save the NHS millions each year by alleviating pressures on hospitals and providing community-based care. However, their ability to continue this vital work is at risk, and they need long-term sustainable support. We need to face the future head-on and fix their funding model in a permanent manner. While I absolutely understand that hospices are under pressure, integrated care boards who fund them are similarly under a great deal of pressure due to year-on-year budget reductions from NHS England. Asking ICBs to fund extra money without it being allocated centrally as revenue is impossible. Madam Deputy Speaker, death is a part of life, as the member for Wimbledon said. As we all know, nobody would say we should neglect healthcare. So why are we neglecting the hospice sector by not securing a sustainable funding formula? To truly address the gaps in our system, we need a sustainable funding model that ensures hospices can meet the growing demands without being forced to cut services. The people of this country deserve a future where every family, no matter their circumstances, can access the highest quality of end-of-life care without worry. One where hospice care is not a postcode lottery, but a promise. Madam Deputy Speaker, let us turn this moment into an opportunity. We must act urgently to implement an improved and sustainable funding package for hospices and palliative care. With constructive action, we can build a system that uplifts the most vulnerable among us, that strengthens the NHS, and that shows the best of what we can achieve as a nation. So let's ensure that the legacy of this debate is not one of uncertainty, but one of determination, passion, and that when we see the 10-year plan, hospice and palliative care will be fully funded going forward. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Munira Wilson.
Much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I pay tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Wimbledon, for securing this debate, and thank the Backbench Business Committee for granting it. As he stated, this debate has taken on an added salience since the honourable lady, the member for Batley and Spen, brought forward her bill on assisted dying. But I hope we can all agree that regardless of what happens to the passage of that bill, there is an urgent need to address hospice and palliative care in this country. And so I just want to touch briefly, Madam Deputy Speaker, on 2 points. One is around children's hospice funding and support, and the other is just more broadly on inequalities in access to palliative care, which is also related to some of the concerns that many of us have about the terminally ill adults end-of-life bill. Now, on children's hospices, I'm very proud to have Shooting Star Children's Hospice in my constituency in Hampton, which my honourable friend, the member for Wimbledon, referred to. As he stated, as well as serving children and young people and their families in my constituency, actually serves a very wide area of South West and West London, and indeed all of Surrey. They provide care and support to children with life-limiting conditions. They provide respite care, family support, and importantly, they also provide a bereavement service. And I know from talking to the mother of a teenager who died very, very unexpectedly from an asthma attack in my constituency that her young teenage friends have been very well supported by Shooting Star as they've been grieving their friend who so unexpectedly and tragically lost her life. And so I just want to take this opportunity, Madam Deputy Speaker, to pay tribute to Shooting Star for their incredible work. Like other hospices, as we've heard, they rely on the goodwill and generosity of so many in our community and beyond, skydiving, running, donating clothes and toys to their shops. As my honourable friend from the member for Wimbledon pointed out, they now face a £200,000 bill as a result of the employer's national insurance rise. And whilst they welcome the Health Secretary's announcement prior to Christmas to renew the Children's Hospice Grant, I would reiterate their question, which was echoed by my honourable friend for Wimbledon: is this a long-term commitment, not just for the next financial year? They've told me time and again they cannot plan for the future if they're living hand to mouth year to year in terms of recruiting staff and putting services in place. And will it be ring-fenced as well? Hospice funding is so variable, and Together for Short Lives, as we've heard, have reported that NHS funding in 2022-23 for children varied by as much as £483 per child. And Hospice UK also did a Freedom of Information request, which shockingly found that a number of ICBs, about 14%, have absolutely no idea how much they're spending on children's palliative care. We need to hold our ICBs much more accountable for palliative care, both children and adults' palliative care. Together for Short Lives have also highlighted a £295 million spending gap in NHS spending on children's palliative care when compared against NICE standards. And Madam Deputy Speaker, that brings me to my second substantive point around the variability of palliative care, particularly with regards to how they compare to national standards. Marie Curie estimates that 1 in 4 people who could benefit from specialist palliative end-of-life care do not receive it. Now, you are more likely to get good palliative care, frankly, if you are richer, if you are more educated, if you are white, and if you are younger. These inequalities across our society in terms of access to palliative care are growing, and the demand is growing too. And it is because of these inequalities that I really struggled. It's one of many reasons, and I had a number of conversations with the Honourable Member for Batley and Spen, why I could not support her bill at second reading. And these inequalities really, really concern me. And when you look at the fact that back in 2011, so getting on for 14 years ago, NICE recommendations that there should be a designated palliative care advice line out of hours implemented in every area of the country, but only 1 in 3 areas of the country offer that. That shows you just how poor we are at putting in place what we've already been told needs to be provided so that people can die a good death. If that happened in any other area of care, particularly in cancer, there would rightly, absolutely rightly, be outrage that we weren't implementing those NICE recommendations. The 2024 Marie Curie Better End of Life report said that large numbers of people were struggling to access services. There was late recognition of their needs and poor communication. It found the impact on carers of the poor end-of-life care was also profound. The physical and the emotional toll that it took on carers left one carer saying, the overall experience is that no one really cares. Madam Deputy Speaker, when we are at our most vulnerable at end of life and our loved ones are also struggling, we deserve so much better. And so we need far greater investment in palliative care and in hospice care. And I urge the Minister to take genuine action to address both the geographic disparities but also the deep inequalities that exist in terms of accessing palliative care. And I urge him to do this regardless of whether the bill on assisted dying makes progress or not, but particularly so if it does, because we have a moral imperative. We cannot be, and this is the thing that really grated with me most and why I could not walk through that eye lobby that day, we cannot be in a position that an assisted death is available universally on the NHS to those identified in the bill, but access to good palliative care is not. So I urge him to make commitments, and I urge the Bill Committee to make sure that there are duties written into law to ensure that there is genuine choice at the end of life. And whether that bill passes or not, we need to see much greater action on good palliative care. Thank you.
Ian Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I first thank the Honourable Member for Wimbledon for securing this important debate and also his passionate contribution. It is shocking that on average only 1/3 of hospice funding is provided by government, with the rest coming from charitable donations. But rising costs, inconsistent income and a shortage of state funding has left the hospice sector in a precarious position. Indeed, many have had to cut back on the services they can offer and are struggling to meet the growing need. The recent all-parliamentary group on hospices made for a sobering experience for all MPs present, with every single representative from the hospice sector outlining fear around the future. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am blessed to have both Clare House and Zoe's Place Children's Hospices in my constituency of Liverpool West Derby, but we witnessed first-hand last year the seriousness of the situation with hospices with the threatened closure of Zoe's Place, which rocked us all to the core of my great city. To lose something so precious to our community was unthinkable. But because of the lack of funding raised in these challenging conditions, it was going to happen. The community of Liverpool and beyond rose to the challenge to save Zoe's Place when it was faced with closure by raising an incredible £5 million in 30 days to ensure that this incredible place could remain open. While I have the chance, I would like to thank in the Chamber every single individual and organisation who worked relentlessly to make this happen. Without you all and the City of Liverpool, we would have lost Zoe's Place. So many to name, but I'd like to thank Steve Morgan Foundation, the 64 Trust and TJ Morris for underpinning this remarkable community effort. But we shouldn't have had to do this. I'm pleased that in December the government recognised the crisis faced by hospices and committed 126 million to the sector, with 100 million of one-off funding and a one-year extension of the Children's Hospice grant. But this is still only a stick and plaster. Hospices need consistent, reliable funding that accurately reflects the cost of care and their value in society, to be able to meet the growing demand for palliative and end-of-life care and ensure people have the best possible experience at the end of their life and prevent future funding crises. Madam Deputy Speaker, hospice sector's leaders have estimated that the need for palliative care in the UK will increase by 25% over the next 25 years. It is clear there needs to be a long-term reform of the hospice funding model to ensure that this demand can be met. And that's why I back calls from the Hospice UK for government to commit to a long-term reform of hospice funding in its 10-year plan for the NHS. So today, a couple of questions for the Minister, who has been absolutely superb in his support of me on Zoe's Place. Will the government ensure that the confirmed 26 million NHS England funding for children's hospices for 25-26 is ring-fenced, distributed centrally and increased in line with inflation in subsequent years? And does the Minister recognise the strong preference among children's hospices for the £26 million of NHS funding to be distributed as centrally managed and ring-fenced grants rather than go and distributed by the ICBs? Without ongoing government support and a fresh funding model, what nearly happens as always placed Liverpool will happen elsewhere. Hospices will undoubtedly close down. The problems are systematic and it's going to take government action to fix that. The City of Liverpool rose to the challenge to save Zoe's Place. Now this place has to rise to the challenge as well and give all hospices the funding they need to survive. This cannot wait, because all who rely on these incredible services do not have time on their side. Thank you.
Seamus Logan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to first of all pay tribute to the member for Wimbledon for securing this important debate and for his heartfelt contribution. I imagine there isn't anyone in this House or perhaps even across these islands whose lives haven't been touched by hospice care. I want to personally pay tribute to my niece, Dr. Roisin Etchells, who works in this field. Recently, this House had what was by all accounts a respectful, informed and emotional debate on the concept of assisted dying, thanks to the efforts of the Honourable Member for Spen Valley. Perversely, this government has introduced additional employer national insurance contribution charges on the independent hospice sector. This can only be described as an attack, an assault on the very concept of assisted dying as we currently deliver it. For that is what hospice care is and does, and what others who deliver palliative care in the independent sector within the community do. In Scotland, one of the leading providers of such care, both in residential settings and in the community, i.e. within people's homes, is Marie Curie. They operate at least 2 residential services and community care in almost every local authority area in Scotland. Here I declare an interest as a proud supporter of Marie Curie and as someone who has helped raise very significant funds for them. They do such wonderful work. They provide skilled care and brighten the lives of patients as they face the prospect of their last weeks, days and hours. Ask any family who has benefited from this support. I defy anyone to find a critic. Of course, I understand that the government must balance their books and that public sector pay rises must be funded. But the failure to offer mitigations in key areas of these self-same public sector services is misguided, ill-informed, clumsy and counterproductive. Members opposite will cry, where will we find the money for these services then? Well, ministers know there are alternatives, but in their populist haste to win the trust of the electorate, they rashly promise not to increase income tax. But look at Scotland, where those with the broadest shoulders pay a little more, where in every tax bracket, more people are coming to Scotland to pay their taxes there every year, where 60% of taxpayers pay less than their counterparts in the rest of this disunited kingdom, and where the government responsible for this alleged mismanagement has enjoyed public support for close to 20 years and continues to do so. We in the SNP estimate that if the UK government had matched the Scottish tax bands, they could have raised 16 billion. In the recently announced Scottish budget, it was encouraging to see that the Scottish Government committed to increase hospice funding by £4 million and to provide additional funding for hospice staff to match NHS pay awards. To me, this is the difference between the Scottish and the UK governments. While the UK government hikes national insurance on employers and votes against amendments to exempt hospices from this hike, the Scottish Government increases funding and puts more money in the pockets of hospice healthcare workers. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I, like other Scottish MPs, probably received a heartfelt plea from CHAS, the Children's Hospice Service in Scotland. And if you had read that, Minister, you would know how desperate their situation is. I implore the Government to think again, to engage with the Scottish Government to ascertain the cost of mitigations for hospice and palliative care service providers and others, and to provide the same mitigating support which has been given to the NHS and other public services in Scotland. Thank you.
Sarah Russell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to, as others have done, pay tribute to my local hospices, St Luke's and East Cheshire, both of which do a spectacular job and are very, very well loved local institutions. I'd like to say a particular thank you to the staff, of course, but also to the volunteers and the donors who are quite literally keeping the lights on. I absolutely welcome the £100 million of capital that the government has funded to provide to hospices, and I'd like to ask the Minister to please meet with me and my colleagues, the MPs for Crewe, Mid-Cheshire and Macclesfield, to discuss a potential local project. In terms of revenue funding, though, I would be remiss of me if I didn't mention that St Luke's and East Cheshire Hospice receive 15 and 16% respectively of their funding from the NHS. I would like to ask the Minister to please review and commit to a funding floor that is transparent, fair and consistent across the country. The quality of experience that my constituents and their families have at the end of their lives should not be dependent on the generosity of individuals.
Dr Ben Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Wimbledon for speaking so eloquently in this important debate and securing it, and of course to the Backbench Business Committee. I'd like to start just by saying hospices are fantastic places, and all of us in this country are lucky to have them. And one of the ways I think about them is people don't go to hospices to die, they go to hospices to live during the last few days or weeks of their lives. And while I'm pleased that the assisted dying bill has led to a renewed interest in hospice and palliative care, I'm sad that a lot of the focus has been around death and the dying process specifically, rather than the broad support and care that hospices and palliative care provides, sometimes over many years for people who have illnesses which may be life-limiting but require certain particular types of interventions, medical interventions, to manage symptoms for people. And I think that's a very important part of the work that hospices and palliative care teams do, but often get sort of, often a lot of the focus is on the death process itself, rather than the overall sort of chronic treatment that's given. And I think one of the important parts of that is, of course, speaking as a former consultant psychiatrist, is, I'd be remiss of me not to mention the psychological support and mental health interventions that palliative care teams and hospices bring. Experts in terms of pain relief, and I tell you as a junior doctor, palliative care teams brought a lot of relief to me when trying to manage very difficult situations with patient care, and they are the experts in terms of the analgesics and that component, and I think that it's important to recognise them not only in terms of hospice but also in terms of the palliative care teams that operate both in hospital settings but also in the community supporting people's symptoms. Of course, I want to pay tribute to our fantastic hospices and care teams which we have locally in the Runnymede and Weybridge constituency, Woking and Sandbear Hospice, which I've visited, which is a fantastic place, and Princess Alice, which is based in Esher, and we also benefit from Shooting Stars, which is in the member for Twickenham's constituency, and I hope to visit that one day too. I'd like to thank all the teams who work in there, both in terms of delivering care and support to people, but also keeping the hospices running and the vital fundraising which they do. Many people support hospices in lots of different ways, whether that's direct donations, whether that's organising fundraising events, and I'm pleased to have been to fundraising events myself for Woking and Sandbear Hospice. In fact, just a few weeks ago, roughly about a week or two ago, I went to the Chertsey Panto, which has been running now for 12 years, supporting the Woking and Sandbear Hospice, and it's around, at least what was announced, that the performance people who visit the Panto window performance, if one can call it that, would recognise they've raised 60 grand over the period of time. And for those members who'd like to see the Chertsey Panto, I have to say it is a panto which has to be seen to believed, and one never will forget the Chertsey Panto after one has gone to it. But the team who organise and run it are absolutely fantastic. It's a fantastic institution and raises a lot of good money for the Woking and Sandbear Hospice. Also, we have territory shops, for example. There's a great one in Weybridge which has been raising money for quite some time for that. So I'd like to pay tribute to everybody, no matter how big or how small, what they do in terms of supporting our hospices and our palliative care sector. Of course.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. Will he join me in promoting St Wilfrid Hospice's fundraiser in Eastbourne? I'm a CEO, Get Me Out of Here, that's trying to get lots of local CEOs and MPs to join them in the Sussex jungle to raise cash for the great work that they do.
Well, I thank the member for his intervention. He'll have to explain more to me what exactly is required in terms of a commitment in the Sussex jungle for the fundraising. But he's right to pay tribute to the great work which is done supporting our hospice sector. And of course, their funding model is part public, part privately supported. And I think that adds a great benefit to them, because sitting outside the NHS, they have a more degree of flexibility in terms of how they approach care provision. That being said, working with Zambera is 31% funded by public sector money. It has 2,000 staff and delivers, as I said, delivers fantastic care and support. But much of this debate has been around what the future is for our hospice sector in terms of funding. And while I'm grateful for the government in terms of some of the money and support it's put forwards towards hospice, sadly it has given with one hand and taken away with the other. The national insurance contributions is very damaging. The hospice also need to manage increasing staffing budgets through Agenda for Change. Marie Currie has said that this is going to cost the sector, the national insurance component, roughly 2.9 million per year. And so what I would like to ask the Minister, if he could, in his closing responding statements, explain what impact assessment has been done on the national insurance contribution rises for hospices, the Agenda for Change, and how many hospices in the UK are currently running in a deficit position, and how he expects that to change over the course of the next year and going forwards as a consequence of the decisions that were made on the budget. And if there is an opportunity for those decisions to be reversed, does he support them? Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Liam Conlon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Honourable Member for Wimbledon for securing today's debate as well. I'm incredibly proud of many things in Beckenham and Penge, but particularly St Christopher's Hospice. St Christopher's Hospice was founded by Dame Cecily Saunders in 1967, and Dame Cecily Saunders was also the founder of the global hospice movement. The hospice movement came about because Dame Cecily, a nurse who was researching pain control, believed that more could be done to help people at the end of their lives. That included physical symptoms, including tackling stigma around painkillers, but also that people should be able to achieve emotional closure through individualised care and support. The assisted dying debate has been mentioned today by many members across the House. I had over 2,000 constituents contact me about that debate, roughly 50-50 split in terms of whether they supported or opposed the bill, but every single one of them was united by compassion, and every single one of them often relayed experiences of seeing people at the end of their lives. But I also want to mention a particular tribute this evening to a woman I was incredibly fortunate to have the opportunity to work for in this place, Dame Tessa Jowl. Tessa was a very good friend, she was a mentor, she was an amazing boss, and 6 years ago next week she made her final speech in this place. Tessa was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumour. I spent the entire time from her diagnosis through to writing the press release on the night she died with her. And she finished her speech in the other place by saying that in the end, what gives a life meaning is not only how it is lived, but how it draws to a close. And I sincerely believe that. And St Christopher's Hospice gives meaning to life as it draws to a close. It does so because it takes a holistic approach, caring for a patient's physical, spiritual, and psychological well-being. I've seen firsthand the intimate bonds and relationships that are established between staff, volunteers, patients, and families. They are also one of the largest providers of palliative care education in the world. And for all of these reasons, across Beckenham and Penge, we all support St Christopher's Hospice. They are a huge part of our community. I was fundraising for the hospice long before I became an MP, and I continue to do so. And people help in lots of different ways. And I'd like to give a special mention to Pengefest, which is South East London's answer to Oktoberfest. Local businesses like Brewery, the Three Hounds, Designer Drapes, Friends of Cater Park, Penge Bid, and many more come together with local residents for a day of fun and fundraising. This included an Oompa band that brought Penge High Street to a standstill last summer. And we'll continue to fundraise for St Christopher's Hospice, but we shouldn't have to for the basics. It benefits everyone, from the NHS to patients, to support our hospices. And that's why I'd like to welcome the announcement from the government just before Christmas of an extra £100 million in hospice funding. The extension of children's hospice grants. This will ease the strain on hospices, benefit patients, as well as the wider health and care systems. But I know that hospices are still facing pressures, including increased demand for services, the rising cost of provision, and discrepancies in funding across the country, as many members have made those points this evening. That's why, as the Minister recognises, hospices must be a key part in the government's plan to shift care into the community, including through their provision of at-home care services which can ease the acute pressures on the NHS. I'd like to invite the Minister to visit St Christopher's to see their fantastic work for himself and to discuss the role of hospices in the government's commitment to ensure that every person has access to high-quality, end-of-life care. Thank you again to the Honourable Member for securing today's debate and to the Government for the vital work they are undertaking on this important issue. Thank you.
Susan Murray.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to my honourable friend for securing this debate on this important subject. As I think many people have spoken about, during the assisted dying discussions, it was clear that the one thing that everybody had in common was that a desire to see better palliative care more available across the country. Nearly a third of palliative care in Scotland is delivered by charities, and as we know, that is the same across the UK. In Scotland, hospice charities provide end-of-life care to over 20,000 people a year, ensuring compassion and care at the end of life. And this figure is expected to rise by 40% in the next 15 years. In my constituency in Mid-Dumbartonshire, we don't have a hospice located within the boundaries, but we have many people who work and volunteer in the hospice sector. And there's concern about a lack of understanding of the core role and wide scope of palliative care, which has for too long been funded outside the NHS, despite a fundamental aspect of care. And this has led to shortfall in services, including, as we've heard, for palliative care for children. Madam Deputy Speaker, for too long, hospices have struggled with insufficient funding from consecutive Scottish and UK governments, with less than half the funding for hospice care coming from government sources. And while the £100 million extra is absolutely welcome, there is still a huge shortfall in funding. The national insurance increase is projected to cost Scottish hospices an extra £2.5 million a year. And this is coming at a time where Marie Curie has highlighted that 1 in 4 people across the UK aren't able to access the support they need. This increased financial burden will undoubtedly lead to fewer beds, reduced services, and diminished quality of care for some of our most vulnerable citizens at the end of life. Inevitably, this will compound the effects of staff shortages already faced by the care industry, further straining hospice care providers. Where palliative care is available, there are still shortages, especially in psychological support and spiritual care, plus the possibility of serious recruitment problems, with any assisted dying provision and in the social care structures that support people in their own homes. 14 care providers have already issued an open letter calling for cross-party consensus on sustainable hospice funding. Their plea highlights the urgent need for additional support to ensure these vital institutions are not forced to ration care or to close their doors. I therefore urge the Government to consider exempting hospitals from the recent national insurance hike again, a practical step to alleviate the financial strain on hospices and hospice charities. By doing so, we don't remove crucial funding from palliative care, and this, as we've heard, is often raised by charitable donations. We must support palliative care services and ensure that all who need hospice care can access it, allowing them dignity and compassion in their end-of-life care. Thank you.
I now call Alison Hume.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for calling me to speak in this important debate, and the Honourable Member for Wimbledon for securing it. I am very grateful the Government has recognised the immense importance of our work in our hospices with the recent announcement of a £100 million funding package for their vital work. In my own constituency of Scarborough and Whitby, we are served by the extraordinary work of St Catherine's Hospice. For 40 years, St Catherine's has supported and lovingly cared for individuals with a terminal illness and their families, not only on site in Scarborough, but also in people's homes within North Yorkshire, covering more than 1,600 square miles. St Catherine's provides an incredible service, and like most hospices around the country, is a charitable, independent organisation largely funded through donations, fundraising and the income from their high street charity shops. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to place on record my sincere thanks to the wonderful staff, the army of selfless volunteers who give freely of their time, and the generosity of local people who all ensure hospice care is available to everyone in the constituency. St Catherine's welcomed our recent funding announcement, but it is clear, however, that one